Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Sim 3D GT series by FTR Events, live and exclusive on Total Sim Sport. We continue the coverage of the double header at the Nürburgring in Germany by going from the GP Strecker layout, which we saw only moments ago, conclude in round number 3 to round number 4 now, where is the full combined layout known as the Gesamtstrecke Lange or the Gesamtstrecke Long. It is the case that we have both the full GP circuit and also the full Green Hell Loop, or the Nordschleife Loop as it is known more formally. And right now we're coming straight into the qualifying action with our drivers taking to the circuit in their own individual qualifying sessions here on iRacing to set the grid for the purposes of our second race of today. In the commentary box you have myself, Paul TX141 Walsh, and I am joined by my colleague here, Chris Rowlands, who has taken over from Seb only moments ago, with Sebastian Boscher, Will Williams being in the car now, making his way around the circuit. Chris, how are you doing and how excited are you for round number 4?
Good evening, Paul. Good evening, everyone. I am mega excited because what a circuit this is, and I'm interested to see how many drivers we've got that do the Nürburgring Endurance Championship that are driving tonight, and I wonder how much of an edge that is going to bring them, because this is an extremely unique circuit on the Sim 3D Sports calendar. I mean, even though we're using part of last round's track, it's a world of difference. So I think this is really going to separate the drivers who've done the practice from the drivers who are just here for a laugh. Not that we have any problem with the drivers just here for a laugh.
Oh, most definitely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there with regards to the fact that this circuit is really going to separate the drivers from those who are really taking it seriously down to the minor details, those drivers who are here on a more casual basis but racing for fun and also for competitive spirit all the same. And what with the fact that we do have approximately around 10 to 15% of the lap being up from our previous circuit, and then as we can see here we do have the Deutsche Payments, Aston Martin making its way onto the Nordschleife Loop, and a number of drivers getting themselves set here. I do have to ask you, what's the one thing when you take on the full 24-hour endurance circuit, what's the one thing you need to have in mind as a driver?
Spatial awareness, I think it's fair to say. This is not a race that you're going to win on turn 1. It is definitely a race you can lose on turn 1 because it's a heavy braking zone, the hairpin that we've just seen Peter Elson in Backmarker Racing Orange go around. And the amount of times we'll all have seen it in iRacing replays, the absurd crashes that you get into that hairpin where drivers are perhaps a little bit too full of adrenaline and not really thinking with their endurance hat on. This is an endurance race. Now, I appreciate this is one of the harder circuits to pass on, for 90% of the lap, that is. But it's no good taking these risks when you've got 2.5 hours of racing to get on with. And, if you've got the straight line speed, wait for the massive long back straight. Although it's easy for me to say that not driving a car. If you're in a car with better straight line speed, that works. If you're not, then this is one of the decisions that drivers are going to have to make. And the other thing that I'd just like to point out is we saw quite a few drivers get caught out at the end of the last race with their fuel levels. Now, there aren't going to be safety cars in this race, and also the lap is about 3-4 times longer. So you'd like to hope that the drivers have done their fuel calculations this time, and we won't see what we saw with about 4 different cars at the end of last race, where they were hoping for a safety car, didn't get it, and had to splash and dash and lose out. And we even saw one class winner change hands as a result of it. So I suspect we'll see less of that later this evening.
Oh, most definitely. And as our drivers are making their way around right now to explain to you guys and girls tuning in what exactly is happening in qualifying, our drivers only have 1 lap to set a time around here. So it is the case that it is all down to that single lap. You cannot afford to get it wrong here. And that in itself placed a big question on our drivers, whether they decide to go all in on that qualifying lap and run the risk of potentially getting it wrong. And the car, depends on where they get it wrong, may end up in the wall or in a far worse situation. They may just run wide if they do on the GP loop by comparison. Alternatively, do they play it safe and just put in a banker lap here and perhaps not qualify as high as they could in their respective field, but no, they'll go to the grid with a lap that they can be happy with, and it will put them somewhere in amongst their peers and contemporaries. And on top of that as well, for those wondering what exactly happens after that qualifying, we jump straight into the race and we will have the rolling start. And with regards to the safety car there, as Chris was saying, if we were to have a safety car, given how the safety cars do work in iRacing with the race director feature that we're implementing here, it would be the case that we would lose a sizable amount of race time behind the safety safety car, because you can imagine if the average lap time, let's say for example in the GT4 class, is somewhere in the region of about 9 minutes and 14 seconds, if my memory serves me correctly, then it will be the case that behind the safety car running a much lower speed, about 80 to 90% less than the normal speed, well, we would lose the majority of the 2.5 hours of racing here behind the safety car, and that's not something you want to do. So our drivers have been warned in the build up to tonight, keep it safe and keep it smart when you're driving around, particularly the Nordschleife loop, for the simple reason there are overtaking opportunities, but they're not going to come immediately. They will come with patience and perseverance. And right now, as we continue to see our drivers making their way around, and we focus in particular here on what is the BMW M4 driver, the geodesic racer here, as he makes his way on up, it is the case, absolutely flying up the hill. I do have to ask you, from the racer's perspective, Chris, when you're running in, say, the GT3 class cars in particular, and you've got all that downforce on the car, and you really are the fastest car out of the circuit compared to, say, the GT4s and also the TCR class cars, do you start to worry immediately about the fact you're at some point going to have to pass traffic, or is that a bit of an afterthought?
It is probably one of the more stressful tracks for it, which is, it's almost counterintuitive in a sense, because you'll be doing a lot less traffic management just because of the length of the lap. I think that the two slower classes tonight are kind of blessed in that sense, because they will almost certainly not have to lap each other. So that's one less thing to think about for our GT4s and TCRs. But let's say with the GT3s, I think this is where we'll see the drivers with the most multi-class experience really shine, because this is a circuit where you've got to really make sure your car body language is immaculate and that other drivers are fully aware at all times what you're trying to do, because there are so many sections of this track where there is only really one racing line, even on the flat out, well, you call them straights, but as we've just following the car we've got here, the Roberto De Felipe in this Scania, even the straights aren't really straight through half of the circuit, so it's not necessarily that easy to get past the car unless you have got supreme straight line speed advantage. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the GT3s do deal with, if you're in a battle in a GT3 field, do you take that massive risk, or do you just hang back, maybe lose some track position, but mitigate those risks that you can take around the circuit? Because, of course, as the stewards have said before the start of today, just to remind our drivers, all three classes have got an equal right to be on the track. So it's not a case of the slower classes get out of the way for the GT3s. They do have to work together. So let's hope that happens. It usually does. But we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. It's not the best analysis. Sometimes to just say, let's just watch the race. Oh, there's a big slide for Antti Tuominen, and that is exactly the trouble with what you were saying, Paul, is do you push or do you take those risks? And that's the trouble. Tuominen was sitting purple sectors, but he hasn't completed his lap, so it's all for nothing now.
Oh, indeed, and that is a very unfortunate moment there. And I mean, for those who do regularly watch the sort of time trialing done by even casual drivers who take their own cars around the Touristenfeuren layout or the tourist driving layout of the Nordschleife loop, it is the case that you even step out of line at one moment around here and the circuit will punish you. And you can see it, to be fair, all the way around the GP loop. We had open spaces, we had barriers and tyre barriers, but they were quite far off. We had runoff areas. Here, now on the Nordschleife loop, it is the case that those barriers are right there. They're right there as soon as you come out the corner. You take one step wrong and you're going to be finding not just a small patch of grass, but also a solid barrier, and that is the worry there. And you make contact, and it's the case. I think a good number of drivers may be expecting to be towed back to the pits, and that's going to cost a huge amount of time in long consideration, even if there is a fast repair in play, given the fact that being towed back over this circuit does take some time. As we do look here, James Armstrong for Brabham eSports rolling his way right now through the latter half of the lap, where it's now all downhill from here. And I'm not saying it's going to go wrong for him, that's why we're calling it downhill, but because the circuit now, after he's gone through the carousel, really does start to turn it into a downhill run that just goes on and on as he makes his way now down to Brunschen corner very shortly. And as he makes his way, in fact, he'll be coming up to Brunschen as of now, be coming into the right-hander here. And as he rolls the car down through the hill, looking very composed right now, the M4 GT3 driver, as he rolls up towards the Isaac curve in very short order and heading up towards that tricky left-hander, absolutely blind-sighted here. And so many corners around here, Chris, are blind apexes, blind summits, some of them as well, where you don't actually see the apex curve until you've ended up mounting it with the car. And it's also a little bit about confidence here. This circuit will be a test of our driver's ability to know where their car is, know the feeling of the car, and just believe they've got the lap.
Yes, exactly. This circuit and this race is going to massively reward those drivers who know exactly how much control they have over their car at any moment. I mean, just look at the GT3 times coming in so far. You've got a 12-second spread over the 11 cars that have qualified so far in GT3 Pro, and even our cars towards the back of that grid, they're very, very quick drivers. Just Sean Campbell right now is putting them to shame somewhat with an 8-minute 14.56. But you see this in any series that races around the Nürburgring. In iRacing officials, those drivers who just know where they can commit their car to, there's so much lap time available. But again, it's just how much are you able to take those risks? And it's all well and good being super quick over one lap. If you don't finish the race, it doesn't do anything for you. As I think James Armstrong, to me, looked like he's slowed down. Perhaps he's not happy with that lap, or he's got a 1x somewhere, so he's just having to go back again for this next lap, although it could well just be the field of depth. James Armstrong is a very quick driver, so it will be interesting to see how he does compared to Sean Campbell with his time so far today. Can someone get within 3 seconds of Campbell's time for the RSR team?
Oh, indeed. And one thing to consider as well is normally when we have much shorter circuits, such as the GP loop that we're just racing on round number 3, normally close times are separated by only 3-4 tenths of a second at most. Whereas here, if drivers are qualifying within a second of one another, that is considered to be incredibly close by comparison. We see Armstrong there taking an 8-minute 11, almost 3 tenths faster than Campbell. My goodness, the man was absolutely flying. He's nailed it.
Definitely shows you how fast I can tell cars are going if I feel like slowing down along the back straight. That is a pretty incredible time, and I wonder if well, he's done 2 laps according to our timing tower, but I don't think he's had physically enough time to have done that. So I would have thought he'd have one more lap in him, but obviously electing not to do it because I mean an 8:11. It's going to be very tough to beat that when you look at the other times that have been done round this track. But if you look at the timing difference between the 3 classes, the GT3s are about 50 seconds quicker than the GT4s, and they're a minute and 10 seconds quicker than the GT4s. So we do anticipate there being some traffic, but there'll be a much longer gap between when that starts happening and when it gets really busy. And I don't anticipate us seeing a huge amount of interaction between the GT4s and the touring cars. But one problem to look out for, and one bone of sort of contention for the GT4s, is if they have an incident and end up behind the touring cars classes, it's going to be supremely difficult for them to get past in some parts of this circuit, because to only have a 20-second pace disparity round a track this long, it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't, especially if certain cars are just happen to be a lot quicker in a straight line, but equally competent round corners, because it's really the cornering speed and confidence that's going to make the difference for being able to get past people today.
Oh, most definitely, and I completely agree with you there. And the one thing our TCRs do have, of course, is that initial corner entry aspect, given their front engine front wheel drive, whereas our GT4s being front engine rear wheel drive, or minus what is Lowry in the Porsche 9, as the Porsche 718 came in GT4. It'll be the case in, well, that's Jackson Lowry for FTR eSports GT4, and also Peter Elson from Backmarker Racing Orange, mid-engine rear wheel drive. But the principle applies there, with the GT4s have a bit more power and overall cornering capability, but that corner entry in those touring cars will mean they can be quite agile around here when it truly matters. And we will wait and see how they interact with one another, and particularly any GT4s who fall behind a touring car. And meanwhile, with regards to the GT3 Pros and the GT3 AMs, one thing we did see in round number 3 was the fact that a couple of AM drivers were able to out-qualify pros in the qualifying section, therefore start ahead and have some space between themselves and their AM peers. Do you think that's going to be as relevant here, given the difficulty of overtaking, or even more so, particularly if we see, say, a repeat whereby we have a GT3 AM driver who's just able to out-qualify the other AMs by a significant margin?
It's a tricky one, because I think it's always a bit of a difficult decision to make. The GT3 amateurs do, of course, score points in the main GT3 category, as well as having their own points for GT3 AM. So, you know, for Matt Terry in particular, who's currently on pole for GT3 AM, he wasn't able to finish the race earlier today, so he's got vengeance in his mind. But I can't help but feel some of those pro drivers are probably going to almost turn their noses up at the GT3 AMs, and I'm not going to sort of speak on behalf of people. We're just sort of thinking that might well be one thing you end up doing, but it's a bit of a trap to fall into, because those GT3 amateurs, you know, they're still a GT3 car, they're still very talented drivers, And if they're ahead of you on merit, then you've got to try and overtake them rather than just assume that they will let you through. We have, of course, seen in previous rounds some of the GT3 AM teams have. You do wonder why they're in the amateur category, really, because they're easily keeping up with half the pro field. Although again, you can see there seem to be levels to the pro field with 3 and 6 seconds separating first, second, and third. It's quite large gaps.
Oh, goodness me, as we see the number 16 car getting it wrong, starting to come downhill. That was Gareth Higgins for Atlantic Motorsport losing on the downhill run. And meanwhile, we do cut to Mick Anderson from RD Supersport 3, our lead driver in the TCR class here, rolling on through on a 919.475. But just addressing your point there, Chris, I completely agree. And I think it is, again, a circuit such as this. And to be fair, in racing, a bit of a divisive circuit, this one, given the fact that some people do see it as more of a time trialing circuit, a circuit where it's an opportunity for a driver to show off their outright speed and control of a car, where others would call it the ultimate racing circuit. Where do you sit on that spectrum? Do you see it as both, something in between?
I think one of the beauties of this circuit, and this is your first experience of my supreme ability to sit on the fence, is that it really does offer something for everyone. I mean, obviously you see in real life with track days for any cars, it is I think by its very nature, to an extent, it is a time trial circuit, but I think even the most experienced time trial drivers, there's still that thrill of actual wheel-to-wheel racing around the track, and it's a real test of the driver's ability to not just keep the car on the track and go quickly, but do it when surrounded by nearly 50 other cars. And I do wonder if, obviously we don't know every driver in the field tonight, and we certainly haven't been following their results outside of the Sim 3D series, but I suspect we're going to have a few Nürburgring experts tonight that we'll see higher up the grid than we otherwise will have done. Now, of course, I did get surprised last round out in Canada, where our very own Seb Botcher-Williams, who I've always known to be a quick driver, but I didn't realise he was as quick as the top GT3 guys. So I wonder if he's perhaps not one of the experts for the Nordschleife, because he's not taking qualifying for his team this evening, but we might well see him in the car later.
Oh, indeed. And I would agree with you there, and in my personal opinion, I align with you, to be honest. In the fact, I see it both ways. I see this circuit as a brilliant showcase circuit for a driver and the car, and being a bit of a time trialing expert or a qualifying expert. I also do respect the fact that it requires a very unique approach to racing here at the full loop, the Gesamtstreckenlanger, in the fact that you do have to have that combination of that willingness to be bold and overtake, but also that patience, which I think many a racing driver, whether in the sim world or the real world, when they're starting out, is something you learn over time through experience. Is that patience to know when to go for the move, when to dive for the move, and when to simply wait for that opportunity. And I think that'll be a big test today for our drivers, even in their own respective classes, because there's some corners you can overtake up here, and there's other corners where an overtake is tantamount to a huge risk, and it could see both drivers going off the circuit. But one place we're going to be seeing plenty of overtaking action will be down the Dottinger here, as we do see one of our GT3 drivers making their way down, and that is Roxy Gibson for Prismatic Motorsports Minerva, the GT3 AM driver here, representing her team out of the circuit right now and flying down towards the last couple of corners to complete their current lap. And they haven't got a time on the board right now, so we just follow them through in the number 198 car. And in terms of that pole time currently in the GT3 AM class, it is an 8:20.542 as set by Terry, and that being in for them, Matt Terry for Matt in Black. And we do see here the Minerva machine make their way across the line, and what's it going to be? And that is going to be P2 in the class there on what is a 8:28.7, and that's their qualifying complete, as we now do cut away across to Matt Terry again, who is on another lap.
Yeah, and we'll see if he can consolidate the time he's done earlier. He's top of GT3 Pro, but we can also have a look at Giovanni Romano, who's driving for Hugh Jass. They're currently fifth in class, and it will be interesting to see if they can improve on that. We have seen in previous rounds some very strong pace from the Hugh Jass team, and it's going to be a very tight GT4 class. And we've got Jackson Larry here. I mean, FTR Esports, another team who we've seen excellent pace. I mean, to be honest, it's just a very strong GT4 group, and it will be interesting to see how they manage to cope with this. And I'm also interested to see particularly these two, although also track limit racing, because we've only got 3 cars tonight in the GT4 field that aren't the Aston Martin. We've got FTR Esports Black in the Porsche, along with Backmarker Racing Orange, and then we've got Raymond Aguilar in the track limit racing GT4, which is in the Audi. So I'm interested to see if those car differences will have too much of an effect here. So they'll have a slightly different max straight line speed, and where we are right now is where that is going to have the biggest impact. I mean, what I suspect we'll see, what I hope we see in some senses, is drivers around sort of, let's say from L's curve onwards, won't really be looking to make that move until they get onto the main back straight here, because there's no point making that move if you're just going to get drafted straight back past. But expect to be on laps 1, 2, and maybe even 3, where the fields are going to be so close to each other still. We may end up going 3 wide and have maybe even 2 banks of 2 wide in each class coming through there, because they are probably still going to be quite close together. And it is amazing how much of an advantage the draft can give a driver.
Oh, indeed. And right now, as we do look to our TCR drivers making their way on through, and that is the Track Limit Racing GT4 driver of Raymond Aguilar here in the Audi, charging on through and looking very composed as he makes his way down. But as he comes charging on down, here is the case. I think we're going to correct our timing screens in the near future with regards to Raymond Aguilar. And I also do think, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering why we do have a GT4 on pole with an 8-minute 20 in a Lamborghini, I think that might be the case at Tuameen, and there it's just a slight error on our screens, but I'm sure we'll get that fixed in due course. But right now, we are watching the Audi RS3 driver come roaring on down the Dosnaha straight here and absolutely hitting the peak performance of that Audi in terms of top end as he rolls his way on down. But it's a bit of a lonely circuit there when you're out there by yourself, and one where it's literally about you and avoiding those 2 walls on either side as he rolls his way on through. And we see the Audi driver come up towards those last couple of corners here, looking to just try and balance his way through the right into left before heading to that timeline and absolutely hammering the throttle and charging on through. And what is it going to be? His previous best, a 9:33.52, and now as he comes to the line, what will it be this time around? He crosses the line and it's going to be a 9:27.46, which will put him effectively a P7 in the TCR class as he comes to the end of the lap. And I believe that Anderson has just come across the line on what is a 9:06.953. That will put him in what is P8 in the GT4 class.
And it's interesting as well to see the drivers who haven't been able to set a time. Now, in some classes, so for example, Lilacs here in Prismatic Academy, that's not the biggest deal in the world because you're still P8th in class. But for we haven't had any GT3 pros be unable to set a time, but some of our GT3 amateurs are pretty solid drivers. So for Sim Party Racing, Stage 1 Racing Green, and Sim Racing Grid M4, starting at the back of the entire GT3 field, which is 21 cars strong tonight, that's going to it's going to be a big ask for them to make up a lot of places tonight. And I reckon we've probably seen everyone set a time that was still out on track. I believe everyone has gone back. It does interest me that some drivers have only elected, or perhaps through taking off tracks at the start of the second lap, but quite a few cars have only set the 1 lap, and that might well be why James Armstrong and Brabham Esports has been able to snatch pole off of Sean Campbell, because Campbell only did the 1 lap. And we've seen Campbell's pace before. Obviously Armstrong is himself a supreme driver, but they're out on a pace with each other, so it wouldn't have surprised me a huge amount had Campbell done a second lap that we could have seen a closer field between the two. But it's all well and good being 3 seconds quicker than anyone else in qualifying. You need to be able to do that for 2.5 hours, and as quick as James Armstrong is, he does seem to have terrible luck with mid-race accidents, certainly from some of the races we broadcast here on Total Sim Sport in the past, because not very often is it his fault, but the end result is still the same, which is why sometimes driving carefully is for the best. But this is someone who's only ever won 2 races in iRacing saying that, so maybe listen to the more winning drivers.
Well, you've pipped me to the post. I've only ever won 1 race in iRacing, and that was in the Junior MX5 Cup, the Fanatec Challenge. But still, that's by the by. But as our drivers make the way on around right now, we are focusing on what is here one of our GT4 drivers, and that's the RD SimSport driver of James Holman, rolling his way right now through at the Kleiner curve, the Kleiner carousel, I should say, and just keeping it within track limits there. My goodness, literally almost taking to the grass there. Nasty corner, that left-hander, but as he makes his way now through the final right-hander before the Dottinger straight. Here's the case here, needing to take that nice late apex, getting a good run, and that's all about just simply keeping the throttle down here. And really, this long run down the straight is your time to take a breather, to calm down, and to get yourself set as he makes his way on down. And it's that opportunity as he comes running down. But that is qualifying complete, in fact, and now we head to forming the grid. So
Yeah,
with qualifying complete, it is the case that we see their lineup on pole. It will be James Armstrong for Bram eSports, alongside him Sean Campbell for RSR by Buttkick at FTR. Then we have Gareth Higgins and Tom Mao on row number 2, Atlantic Motorsport alongside Apex Tech Racing. There's Alpine Stars at GD6 Racing, Evan Pickle, and alongside Apex Tech Racing's Chris Barrett, followed by Matt Terry, the pole sitter for the GT3 AM class, Matt in Black P7, with what is Anthony Tuminen, 49 Motorsports P8, Thomas Mosek and Kai's Heijerman in P9, P10 respectively. And then we do have on row at number 6 Rich Corfor for FTR Esports GT3, joined by Stage 1 seniors Justin Neja in P12. On row at number 7, Josh Wiggins for RD Simsport, joined by TLR 911's Simon Ball at P14. And then we have Brad Crouch, followed by Kevin Dewell on row at number 8 there. On row number 9, we have Prismatic Athena with Cass Silliman at the wheel, and alongside is Prismatic Maverna's Roxy Gibson. And then on row at number 10, it is Roberto there, in fact, full name to get that clarified, Roberto Di Felippis for Siciania Endurance Motorsport, being joined there by Over Linden from Stage 1 Racing Green. Then on row number 11, we have Ian Luo from Sim Racing Grid M4, being joined by our pole sitter in the GT4 class, and that is Daniel Murphy from Deutsche Payment Def Omen. And then behind them on row number 12, Tim Darracott from Effect Esports, joined by Jordan Johnson from Orbit Motorsport Venus. On row number 13, it will be Giovanni Romano from Huge Jazz, followed by Brandon Blakesley from Vulcan Sim Racing. And on row number 14, we will have Stephen Walkup, being joined by Jackson Lowry there, the Brammer Esports Blue driver, just out qualifying the FTR Esports GT4 Black driver. And then behind them on what will be a row at number 15, we will have Trevor Anderson from D-Line Racing as the gridding process is complete, and they'll start rolling up towards the start-finish line, and he'll be joined by Eric Biggs in the 49 Motorsports Magenta machine on what is row 15. Row 16 will consist of Peter Elson from Backmarker Racing Orange, joined by Tom Jenkins from Track Limit Racing GT4. James Holman and Alex Marsh King make up row number 17, RD Simsport ahead of FTR Esports GT4 Yellow. And then we will have last side GT4's Brian Speicherman in the RTL Racing Team Limburg machine, joined on row number 18 by our pole sitter in the TCR class of Mick Anderson from RD Simsport 3. It's Harold Stadler and Ryan Chevalier on the 19th row in the TCR class, followed by Ethan Buss and Hayden Robinette on a row at number 20 there. Robinette having a difficult qualifying session in the Drive Live Simsport machine. We then have Raymond Aguilar from Track Limit Racing GT4 out qualifying Daniel Martin from RD Simsport 2 on row number 21. And then our final row for going racing, Lilac Zia from Prismac Motorsports Academy, being joined by Robert Gilbert from Sim Party Racing, making up all 22 rows. Well, my goodness, we've got an absolutely packed grid, and as they make their way towards the start-finish line for what will be at the commencement another 2.5 hours of racing, Chris, who would you put your money on here to be leading come the end of the opening lap? James Armstrong or Sean Campbell? These two have been toe-to-toe over the racing today, over all 3 rounds, and now they go racing once again in round 4.
well, I'm going to apologise to the person I nominate in case our commentators curse them, but I think James Armstrong's going to take advantage of the all-round capabilities of the BMW. I think he'll still be in the lead at the end of lap 1. I don't necessarily think he'll still be in the lead by the end of the race, but that's not a criticism of his ability. It's just Sean Campbell in his supreme consistency as we see some tyre warming on our thankfully shortened parade lap. I don't think anyone particularly wanted to participate in a parade lap of the entire Nürburgring. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they get on, and I think it must be very difficult for the drivers to cope with the adrenaline on this shortened parade lap. But we'll have to see who copes with it best as we're about to get going.
Indeed, and as our drivers make their way out the final corner, we now wait to go racing at the green. James Armstrong will take us away. and it's lights out. Away we go as James Armstrong sets the pace and makes his way down to turn 1 in round 4 of the Sim 3D GTT series on what is iRacing as they make the way down into the braking zone here. Sean Campbell having to go defensive versus Gareth Higgins, who tries to go around the outside as all of our drivers concertina into turn 1 and make their way into the Mercedes arena. And Sean Campbell holding on to that P2, but Gareth Higgins on the offensive. And further down, we have already got quite an exchange with Antti Tuominen from 49 Motorsports gaining 3 places at the start of this race and is continuing to push on in the number 49 machine as they all roll the way out the Mercedes arena. And all of our GT3 drivers having a safe start here as they now head down towards turns 5 and 6, still in the GP loop, of course, as that starts the lap. But as they all their way through, meanwhile, the GT4 class, Daniel Worth continues to lead. Oh, we got a spin there going into turn number 2. I think there may have been a little bit of contact. That's Tim Darracott who's gone for a spin. And Forgy has not hit the wall, just going into the runoff area at the Mercedes arena. But that's not the way he will avoid to start his race. And meanwhile, in the TCR class, Mick Anderson is continuing to lead the RD Sim Sport 3 driver as they all roll the way over through. But of course, the TCR class here gets very different tuck under the brake, and it's all about who feels the most confident to be aggressive on the brakes on those front tyres into the opening couple of corners. And right now, we can see Ethan Bass and Hayden Robinette changing places in the battle for P4 in the class. They're side by side coming out of the Mercedes arena, but there's only a little bit of nip and tuck here. A few elbows popping out, but nothing major, and become roaring on down in towards turn number 5. But meanwhile, we jump back to the GT3s here, and it is the case that as we look at them rolling the way on through, we can see it is the case that Antti Tuominen right now, after making those initial gains, 2 places gained. The 49 Motorsports driver, the best of our gainers, as they now come towards the end of the GP loop here. Well, fantastic start to the race. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
I can't believe we only had the one incident. I do feel for Tim Darracott in that Effect Esports car because he was a bit of a passenger in that incident. But James Armstrong can count his lucky stars that Gareth Higgins got a good launch, because the fact Sean Campbell was having to defend from that has just allowed him to eke out a nearly second-long gap. If he can just extend that another half a second and get out of draft range, he can start really just focusing. You know, at a certain point, you don't have to look in your mirrors. You can just focus on your own race, and that is such a huge advantage compared to the few drivers behind who are just going to have to pay attention to everyone around them. Whereas James Armstrong, he can set the pace. We know how quick he is. It'll be interesting to see if he can try and pull a gap out from Sean Campbell, because I do think that is his best chance of winning this race.
Oh, indeed. And as the drivers now roll the way through the opening sequence of corners here and start to head up towards where's the race tricky right-hander, we see in our GT4s here Tom Jenkins batting for position. He's currently in P11 battling there with Brian Spikerman. And as they roll on through here, well, it's the case they're going to try and go too wide as they come out Sabine Schmidt curve and now roll the way down and around through the opening sequence of corners here, of course, are known as the run to Hoheiken. And as they head on through, we can see Darracott trying to find his way back up the order after what was a very strong qualified session, undermined by that moment into the Mercedes arena, and now he's got to play the patience game for Effect Esports. Oh, goodness me, it's into the wall there, and there's no contact. It just seems to be a loss of the rear end, and that was the RTL machine, the Racing Team Limbo machine, getting it wrong, and that's on cold tyres. What those GT4s not having tyre warmers, it's the case they've got to do all the warming themselves. As Jackson Lowry here battling for position, he goes up to P5 as they roll their way through floodplates, and as they make the way up through now the long run, heading all the way up towards Arenberg corner. It is the case that we can see Jackson Lowry ducking in behind once again here, the battle with World Cup. And well, these are 2 drivers, of course, known for battling one another in the series so far, the 2 teams, we should say. And as they come roaring on through into the braking zone for Arenberg here, I think it's the case that Lowry just taking the patient approach now. That overtaking opportunity has faded away, and now it's the wait to the run up towards Aldenauer Forst as we get a replay here of what happened moments ago for Brian Spikerman. Your thoughts, Chris?
Well, that was very good, very confident driving from Tim Darracott. You could see Brian Spikerman leading up to that incident. He'd placed his car very well just to avoid Tim Darracott coming alongside, but you could just see the pressure telling there. Still got cold tyres, just loading a bit too much as we come around what is a very awkward, very bumpy section of the Nürburgring, although in some senses the entire track is. And this is what happened to Kevin DeWell at Stage 1 Racing. Very similar, and he's actually managed to oh dear, a complete passenger there, the other GT3. Poor Kevin DeVoe, he's actually had to tow that back to the pit lane. That's going to be a very long tow for them, and I suspect it was Craig Molnar of Track Limit Racing GT3, because they have dropped down 6 places as well, still in the running but at the back of the still driving GT3s. And as we saw with the other incident on the first lap, the other car really completely victimless. Oh, and another incident there for RPM. Brad Crouch. Able to keep going though, which is pretty good. And I think that must have been Cass Tillman in the other car. That bonnet not looking particularly happy. But yeah, while all this has happened, Ian Luo in the Sim Racing Grid M4, they've made up 6 spots, which is the most of anyone in the entire GT3 field. Now, he is a full 7 places behind Matt Terry, who's leading in Matt in back car, who will be doing this race solo. It's a solo team. So he's got quite a way to go to lead in GT3 AM, but 6 places up at the start of this race. That is very promising indeed.
I completely agree with you there, Chris. I think Ian Lowe, one to watch now. He does seem to have things nailed down very well at the start of this race, but we do cut back to a moment ago. That's Gareth Higgins coming up through the long left-hander there up towards the steel striker. Gets it wrong, and the evasive action needed to be taken there by the number 33 car, and that was Tom Mail taking that evasive action for Apex Tech Racing. And my goodness, well, those reactions, I can tell you, we talked about inhuman reactions earlier on in terms of dodging wayward cars. But as we try to find a little bit of a look back there with regards to what happened, I think we're going to get the onboard from Tom Mao here, and this was Tom Mao's perspective. And watch this, the car literally spin across. Oh, and it was contact, but Mao able to keep the car pointed. I think there is some suspension damage there, but not too much to hopefully compromise his race. So that's what he'll be hoping as we come back to live pictures now. And Ian Luo here pressing on as we look to Matt Terry as he makes way through. But there is, well, that's Tom Mao going slow, and everyone having to take evasive action there. And well, that is very unfortunate for Tom Mao. That clip to the wall after the contact with the wayward Lamborghini has hurt his race. I think he's going to try and limp the car home to the pit lane rather than avoid the tow. And as they make the way around right now, we look to Chris Barrett here from Apex Tech Racing, running P3 in the GT3 Pro Class. He runs a little bit wide, but still putting in a solid opening lap here as he continues his way around.
We may only be 6.5 minutes into the race, but I think at this point we can say I think we know who the top 2 in GT3s are going to be today, because in 3/4 of a lap, Armstrong and Campbell have pulled out nearly 10 seconds on the rest of the field, which is quite frankly incredible driving from the both of them. And I really hope these two can stick together for the whole race, because I'm really looking forward to what could be an absolutely incredible battle between 2 insanely talented drivers. And just look how much control James Armstrong has over that car. The pace they're putting through there is just amazing. But that's not the only battle we're going to have tonight. You can see Rich Cawthor here, lots and lots of GT3s in front of him, and he's going to try to get past that. Naya in the Stage 1 Racing Senior GT has managed to get past him already on this lap. So Cawthor looking for revenge. In fact, he is up 1 place, but the cars in front of him are all up 3 or 2 places. So he's not quite been able to take advantage of some of the incidents like other drivers have. But if he gets a good run as we come out here, he's got a long time to try and make that pass. But unfortunately for him, Naya is going to have Ian Eiserman's Backmarker Racing Yellow Draft just up the road in the sister Lamborghini. So we'll have to see what happens. And it looks like Armstrong may well have lost a bit of time. And they're actually going to go too wide here. Who's going to be brave under the brakes here, do you think?
Oh, I think it's going to be Campbell. Campbell will know he'll want to take the lead, because if he's got the lead of this race, even after 1 lap, he'll have the initiative going on to the next lap. And Campbell getting the move done there as they come to the end of the opening lap. And, well, Sean Campbell right now really pushing on. And Armstrong there with just a slow moment. Perhaps something went a little bit wrong, or perhaps he was doing it. Perhaps they're looking to yield the position to do some fuel saving, although I think that'd be a bit uncharacteristic. But they're going to battle down to turn 1. So whatever's happened, we put that by the wayside as James Armstrong looks down the inside for Bradford eSports and takes the place back from the RSI by butt kicker FTR driver Sean Campbell. So they battle their way into the Mercedes arena, and my goodness, I think you're right, Chris, in the fact that these two, we are going to have a battle on our hands for hopefully the full 2.5 hours, and it'll be between our 2 leaders in the GT3 class. As meanwhile, we see Mick Anderson has lost out the lead of the TCR class of this opening lap, and he's lost it there to what is our leader of the TCR class, Ryan Chevalier from FTR Esports TCR. These two exchange places. And as they roll their way on through, it is the case. We look at the GT4s, and we've got a 5-way battle here down the bottom of the HUD. You can see 3 in a line on the right of your picture, and then 2 on the left. And at the head is Trevor Anderson there for D-Line Racing as he tries to hold on to that position. Goes charging underneath the Bilstein board very shortly. And, well, it's a battle of the draft. And I think that Porsche, the rear of the group there, is probably just trying to hold on. Given the Porsche is not that strong on the straights by comparison. But they're side by side here. Anderson trying to look to hold outside all the way round on the brake. braking. He just about gets it on the brakes. They're very brave stuff from Trevor Anderson versus James Holwood from RD Simsport. And we can see there Eric Biggs from 49 Motorsports, Magenta also trying to close on in as we are in front to Darracott and Holman battling and squaring off in the run down towards turn number 1. And well, if it's any indication, we saw that battle at the front of the field on GT3 Pros, and now we're seeing in the midfield on GT4s. We're going to be seeing a lot of side-by-side action here over the course of the time remaining. But Tim Darracott here, the Effect Esports driver, who's had to really make a recovery out of this. And since his disastrous moment here at turn number 2 on the opening lap, he's gone from the back of the GT4 class all the way back up to P8. He's not wasting any time, Chris.
Yeah, he's done very well to get back up, and the stewards have actually given Jordan Johnson in the Orbit Motorsport Venus car, which is currently in second. They have received a warning for the contact that Tim Darracott was the victim of into the second corner of the first lap. Now, I really feel for the stewards. This is going to be a very, very busy race for them indeed. What I do think will be interesting to see is the advantage that Tom Mayle, Brett Crouch and Cass Silman will have had from being able to get their cars back to the pits without having to tow. Compare that to Kevin DeVale, who did have to tow and has now been in the pits for 7.5 minutes. And no one in the GT4 fields had to pit for damage, so kudos to everyone in that field for keeping it clean, especially when we saw just how close they were all getting to each other on that long straight leading up to the start-finish line. And we've only had the one driver in TCRs have to pit, and that's Daniel Martin in RD Simsport 2, who we saw have that contact earlier in the first lap. But we're going to hope that that's going to calm down now as the field starts to spread out a little bit. But we have, of course, still got these pockets of battles.
Oh, indeed, and it's those little pockets of battles which, of course, keep the eyes of our cameramen around the circuit, as we do see James Armstrong here leading. He's found his way back ahead of Sean Campbell. We saw that, of course, into turn 1 and through the Mercedes arena, and now Armstrong in that position where he has a very fast Porsche 911 GT3R, giving that hot pursuit as the BMW M4 driver will be giving it his all here, but he has that horrible pressure which we were talking about earlier with regards to the fact he can't focus just on the lap ahead of him. He has to focus on the driver behind and what Campbell's going to be doing. But already the respect we've seen between these two, I think, gives Armstrong a little bit of comfort in the fact that he doesn't have to continuously keep looking at his rearview mirror. It's not as though he can't trust Campbell to race fairly and cleanly behind him. He obviously has to keep an eye out for a potential lunge into a corner under braking, but at the same time, it won't be that unknown of what's the driver behind me going to do. It's more of a case of, okay, he's there, he's threatening, as we do see there, Campbell almost ran a little bit wide as they roll the way on down. And we look back to the battle here for P3 in the GT3 Pro class, and it is the case after the weeks have made huge gains since the start of this race. The P3 driver there of Anthony Tuaminen for 49 Motorsports, so Chris Barrett as well for Apex Tech Racing FTR. He's made a couple places, made 2 places on that opening lap. Both of these drivers really coming through the field quickly despite their qualifying sessions.
I think it just goes to show if you've got the confidence in the car to make those moves or take advantage of other people's offs, there's a lot, there's a lot you can do. I mean, we've seen in a few of the classes. So Lilac Zaya for Prismatic Motorsports Academy and TCR, she's up 3 places in class. That's all on track. She's now up to 6th, so that's pretty good going for Lilac. And the nice thing here is it's a pretty close together field. I mean, Lilac is a bit further behind Robinette in Driveline Simsport, who is P5. But as you can see, there's a battle going on there between Orbit and Driveline. There's a battle for the lead going on for RD Simsport, FTR and Brabham just behind them. So if these guys trip each other up, there's still plenty to be gained for Prismatic, Sim Party, and even Track Limit and RD Simsport 2. The entire, these fields, this race is far from over, as we've already talked about. Tim Darracott's proving. He's only 13 seconds off Daniel Muth. Now, I make it sound like that's nice and easy. We've seen the kind of pace that Daniel Muth can put in, but I don't think Effect Esports' race is done and dusted. I think they're still within a very good shout for a podium finish here if Tim Darracott can keep up the good work after that contact on turn 2 of lap 1.
Indeed, and we just cut back here to, I believe, Alex Marsh King, and this was only moments ago as he was making his way up into Ardenau Forst, and the car just coming loose there on the bump on the left hand, a very tricky left hand there because of the fact you've got to get that weight transfer to settle down over what is a bump in the road and also a very high apex curve, and unfortunately for him that is a jump to the pits, and Alex Marsh King for FTR Esports GT4 a yellow having to be towed on in, and that will drop into the back of the field, as I'm hearing that Gareth Higgins as well in the GT3 Pro class has had a moment as we watch the leaders of GT3 Pro class. But now we come back to this moment, and just take us through this, Chris.
I think, possibly just pushing a bit too hard. I don't think you can blame cold tyres 15 minutes into the race. But I do wonder if Gareth Higgins was perhaps carrying a little bit of damage from that incident we saw a little bit earlier on in the race. And I wonder if there's any damage from that incident. Did it just unsettle the car that little bit? And all of that practice, bear in mind, most of these drivers would have practiced this circuit in pristine cars. That's often what we do, is when the car gets a bit of damage and we're practicing, we just go and get it repaired in the pits and go straight back out. But there is value to learning how to drive these cars with a little bit of damage, because very often that's the condition you drive these cars in the race. And if any track is going to punish you for small changes to the balance of your car, it is going to be the Nordschleife. But I personally hope this battle we've got on screen here between Armstrong and Campbell, I really hope their egos get in the way of this. I really hope. Oh shit, big jump on the track there for Campbell. That was, just shows you how hard these cars are pushing. He's getting airborne as we come round here, and yeah, I just hope these two take it really personally when they get overtaken by each other, because what I want to see is super aggressive driving from both of them for the next 2.25 hours, because they've got plenty of time to play with. Now, Antti Tuominen in third has done a very good job to get up to third, but you know, he's already 16 seconds behind. I think third's the best he's going to do. Is Hugh Jass goes wide there, and you can see the congestion here in the GT4 class. It's Tim Darracott that's able to take advantage of this now. Although, as we're going to watch out for a straight GT3, Chris Barrett in the Apex Racing appears to be stationary, not far up the road. Jackson Lowry is Tim Darracott's next victim in the FTR. I think that Apex is perhaps stuck somewhere and going back to the pits, because it doesn't appear to be driving anywhere in particular. So that's a shame for Apex Tech Racing. But yeah, Tim Darracott, he's now only 4 places down on where he started, which is very good going. And if he can get past the FTR Esports Black, we'll get a really good idea of exactly how much pace he has.
Oh, I completely agree with you there, and it is the case that Tim Darracott right now having to make one great recovery. As we look back here at Jackson Lowry only moments ago, and what happened with Hugh Jass, and this is Jackson Lowry up the inside, and Hugh Jass, I'm not sure if he's just missed his braking point there, and coming through the corner, the car's just, he's had to pull the car off the road there. Is that a potential punch or something wrong with the car? 'Cause it didn't look as though there was any contact.
I think there's possibly a steering wheel failure there. That car doesn't look very happy, and that is a shame for one of the best named teams in the grid, who was going very well. I think they've got going again. Yeah, they are moving on the timing screen. They are now in 12th for the GT4s. They're not a huge amount of time behind track limit, but there's going to be some worry that if they're having some technical issues, this is very early in the race to be making a pit stop that is going to benefit you in any sense, although certainly better now than on lap 1. And yeah, Tim Darracott now getting very close to Jackson Lowry in the FTR black car in front. But this is the thing we've talked about already. Does he make the move now, or does he wait for that nice long straight coming up in not too long now? Because the trouble is, if you make the move now, is he just going to lose it again on the straight?
Well, I think he'll be a bit patient here, but I think that Aston Martin does have the leg advantage over the Porsche Cayman 718 GT4, although you can see there as they make their way through the Kleiners carousel just how much speed the Porsche can carry through given the drivetrain layout as they roll their way into the right-hander that precedes the Dustin Ahoa, and as they make their way now down onto long straight, this is where we'll see Darracott unleash the V8 beast under the front of the hood, and as they make their way down here, will he close up rapidly? Will it take time? How much downforce they both run the car? Questions that only the drivers can answer directly, and what we have to decipher here in the commentary box. And as they make their way down, you can see they're all line astern. And it's the case that Darracott here peeling out quite nicely there. And in fact, you can see how it is the case that behind Jackson Lowry having to tuck back in. But look at how much speed Darracott's carrying up the hill here. That's at least a 2-3 mile an hour advantage, if not more, as they make their way over the Bilstein, well, sorry, under the Bilstein board, and now down towards the final couple of corners here. Darracott now in clear air, as you said earlier, Chris. Now we will see his true pace being unleashed, and the pace he's got to try and run to is what is an 8:59 up front. But meanwhile, we do look here to Thomas Bosek, who makes his way past a fellow rival of what is Matt Terry there. And in fact, the Matt in Black driver, I think, yielding a little bit, recognising the fact that he does still have 4 GT3 Pro drivers between himself and his nearest rival, Ian Luo, who's down in P11 overall, whereas Terry right now running in P6 overall. And the GT3 AM driver, well, he has got Rich Corfor right behind him here, and the FTR Esports GT3 driver will not want to spend too long behind, given the fact that we've got Justin there here just behind as well, and the Lamborghini driver is starting to bear down on Corfor as they roll the way on through. Looking good so far. And just cutting over to you, Chris.
Yeah, this is sometimes the jeopardy of being in a long train of drivers, as we've got here in the TCRs, as we're going to go on board with Ethan Bass of Orbit. He's got Hayden Robinette of Driveline Simsport ahead. Are we going to see it move into the hairpin? We've not seen, after the end of the first lap, we've not seen a huge amount of action into turn one. Of course, we saw Campbell and Armstrong make a move, but Ethan Bass just electing for now to stay behind. Of course, one of the advantages here on the main GT part of the track is that it is just a little bit easier to overtake, so that you can afford not to make any desperate lunges. And I think 20 minutes into a 2.5-hour race is not the time to be making desperate lunges anyway. But the trouble, of course, for Bass is that Robinette has got the Brabham eSports hissing Sid car of Harold Stadler ahead of him, which is just going to be providing a little bit of a tow for them as well. So it's all well and good trying to make that move, but you don't necessarily want to lose that tow yourself. So it's sort of, you're going to fall into a bit of a holding pattern at this stage, especially when you think Mick Anderson for RD Simsport 3, who's leading the TCRs at the moment, he's only about 3.5 seconds up the road. So why take any risks right now? Because it could well be, save a bit of fuel and you can jump some of these drivers in the pits. So, these drivers have got a lot to think about. It's not just get round the Nürburgring safely. It's also make strategic decisions that, for the very close top 5 in the touring car division, these could make or break your race.
Oh, indeed. And as we look to our GT4s here, we see Jackson Lowry now under pressure in the Porsche 718 versus the Aston Martin behind her, Trevor Anderson from D-Line Racing. And the FTR eSports GT4 driver, I do wonder here, given the disparity it would seem with regards to that straight line speed, but Lowry does have that speed through the corners to compensate to an extent, whether he might be thinking about a strategy that potentially tries to undercut or overcut the Aston Martins, because we've seen that Lowry is fast around here when he's in those qualifying conditions. We saw that in the qualifying session, but right now it is the situation whereby that consistency doesn't seem to be paying off versus the peers around him. And could he potentially gain it on strategy here, Chris, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's certainly something to consider. I mean, there is a lot of the section of the track, as in the background you can see Simon Ball for Track Limit Racing just getting past Peter Elson as he makes his way back through. Of course, Track Limit having to be one of the cars that had to pit on lap 1 for damage, and actually it appears probably had some of the bigger amounts of damage. They were stopped for 30 seconds. You compare that to their nearest rivals ahead of them in the GT3 divisions. Cass Silman for Prismatic Athena stopped for less than 10 seconds, same as Brad Crouch for RPM and Tom Mayle for Apex Tech Racing. So it'll be interesting to see how well Simon Ball is able to get through the GT4 field. Now, the GT4 field is a bit more spread out, so it's in the interest of the GT4 drivers as well, just to facilitate that pass, because they don't want to get stuck with the GT4 or the GT3, sorry, behind them. And also, one thing you can do, if you let them through in the right place, you can potentially follow Simon Ball through, and maybe that's a way for someone like Jackson Lowry to make that position back up, because he's managing to follow Tim Darracott in the FX Esports car for the most part. But of course, he's got Trevor Anderson for company just ahead of him, and this is the as soon as I say the GT4 field is spread out, here Simon Ball's got to contend with 3 cars in a row. So Eric Biggs letting him through okay, but he's going to get slightly sandwiched in between Trevor Anderson and Biggs now. But Anderson, this is for position, so Anderson is pretty entitled to look after his own race rather than just completely facilitate the pass. But like we were just saying, maybe it's worth letting him through and then taking advantage of any compromise to Jackson Lowry's line and see if that works. Although I think it might be that Trevor Anderson's the one that lost out, because Biggs is now quite close behind with a long straight up ahead.
Indeed, and as Eric Biggs here tries to follow him through as they go through the drive at Rex sequence corners, the 3 right-handers back-to-back, hence the name. We see they come into the very heavy braking zone here, coming all the way down the hill and breaking into the very sharp hairpin here, which just proceeds to allow the link-sync combination. But as they make their way through, we look to James Holman, who is trying to close up to this battle, and Eric Biggs right now caught between a rock and a hard place, given the fact that he'll want to try and find his way past Trevor Anderson for D-Line Racing, but the 49 Motorsports Magenta driver also has to worry about the fact he has Holman behind, and we do know that the RD Simsports driver behind, when he is in the zone, can be very fast indeed, as we also see that Simon Ball just finding his way at the head of the picture past Jackson Lowry in his gradual resurgence up the field. But as they come roaring on through now and roll their way through, always the right-hander of Bergwerk before they make their way up the hill towards the Stillstrecker corner. It is the case now. It's all about that straight line speed, that grunt up the hill once again, and just staying in the draft if you've got a driver in front of you and trying to gain by little margins as they roar on through. But with almost the opening half an hour of this race complete and the time continuing to build up here, it does seem as though now our drivers are settling into a rhythm. And I think, would you agree with me, Chris, that now drivers are really starting to think more about that strategic aspect in terms of, okay, they may have a driver near them who they're battling with, but more about, okay, when's the pit stop going to be? Will I go for the undercut? Do I go for the overcut? Am I running to strategy? Or do I have to change the strategy because of how things have played out earlier?
I do think at this stage of the race, track position is perhaps not the most important thing. Like we were saying earlier with the, think to TCRs, for example, there's 4 seconds separating the top 5. Track position means very little in an endurance race when there's 4 seconds on the line. If you can save 4 seconds in a pit stop, then that's far more important. So in some senses, Ethan Bass is in a better position. And I do wonder if Evan Pickle in the Alpine Stars Geodesic car is perhaps doing the same thing with Antti Tuominen in the 49 Motorsports Maroon, because these two drivers are both, driving pretty quickly. We'll just see what lap times they've set on this lap. Pickle was 3 seconds a lap quicker last time. They are 0.03 of a second separated from each other, having both done 8:22.8 on this lap. So they do, as you say, they seem to be quite happy to sit in a holding pattern. And I think just to really emphasise just how good Armstrong and Campbell are driving right now in first and second, they're 8 seconds a lap quicker than that. And I don't think any of us sat here can do an 8:20 in a GT3 round this track right now, which is, it's already a quick time. It's just the Armstrong Campbell times just that little bit quicker. And our former leader of the GT4s, Daniel Muth for Deutsche Payment Death Omen, has had himself about an 8:20 spin there. And our driver on a warning, Jordan Johnson for Orbit Motorsport Venus, they are now in the lead of the GT4s. Daniel Muth, very uncharacteristic for him to be making mistakes. Unfortunately, a tree blocking quite all of the instance. We can't see what happened there. But now Stephen Walkup's looking very interested to see if he can get through in the Brabham eSports blue car. And of course, I've really cursed Simon Ball saying he's going to have a nice easy run through the GT4s, because he is now fighting, or waiting rather, for the 3rd and 4th place GT4s to sort themselves out so that he can carry on his merry way through the field. And being very polite so far, I'd say, Simon Ball, and Walkup managing to get that position off Muth. I do wonder, does that Deutsche Payment car have quite bad damage? We aren't quite into the pit window, but he has no bonnet. That's, I mean, some weight loss there, but I suspect he probably would prefer to have not hit the wall to lose that bonnet. And yeah, Walkup taking full advantage. You've got that Brabham eSports blue car into 3rd for the TCRs, and it's the only Porsche in GT4 if you discount our 10th place driver Peter Elson in the Backmarker Racing Orange, who is doing a good job and trying to keep up with the RD Sim Sport driven by James Holman in the Aston. We'll just have to see here, does that Porsche have the welly to get past the Aston Martin?
Well, I think it's going to be very close. He's literally tucked in so close in that slipstream. In fact, I think he's trying to reach out and grab the rear wing of the Aston Martin. He pulls out for the potential move here. Elson's going to give it a go, but as they make their way down the dotted Ohio straight here, it's going to be very close. The Porsche just does not have enough. He's inching closer to be side by side, but it's taken a 30. He's probably rocking in the seat right now, and in fact, he has to back out, and he just does not have the speed. But what that does say to Peter Elson is the fact that he may, over the course of the lap, just be a little bit faster compared to his adversary of what is James Holman, and could he potentially use that as a signal? Oh, goodness me, Holman outbrakes himself there into the final pair of corners and just about avoids a major contact with the wall, and James Holman loses the place and comes into the pits in response, as we've also got in Daniel Muth, of course, with that damage that he picked up earlier. And now we look to Jackson Lowry, the other one of our 2 Porsche 718s, as he goes a little bit deep. I thought he was trying to do the shortened version of what's the GP loop. I was going to say, we're not running that today, Jackson. We're running the full loop as he makes his way through turn number 2 and down into 3, and he's got the pressure, to be fair, of Anderson behind. That's Trevor Anderson, the D-Line Racing driver, who is really trying to take that P5. But to be fair, to Jackson Lowry's credit, ever since he was passed by Darracott, it's the case he's not given up, but with a little bit of oversteer on the exit of turn number 4. I think it's the case he's going to have to get up the position now, as we do see there. Here's the case that Anderson coming on through and gaining that P5, but Jackson Lowry really trying to push on as he rolls his way out of 6 and down towards the Dunlop curve at turn number 7. And just coming back to your point much earlier, it was the case as we look back here to a major moment, and this is Tom Mouth at Apex Tech Racing coming through turn number 10, and the rear just kicking out, taking a bit too much apex curve there, and the rear of that Porsche 911 becoming unsettled. Fortunately for him, just parking on the grass, in fact jumping to the pits by the looks of things.
do wonder if perhaps there's something else going on with that car, because you don't really want to tow at the Nürburgring anywhere because of the amount of tow time it adds on, but you definitely don't want to tow near the start of the lap, because that is a long old time. You can see there Chevalier in the FTR Esports TCR, that car wobbling all sorts under braking. He's doing well to keep up with Mick Anderson. You do wonder if maybe that car is just a little bit unstable while it's following. But Chevalier, I think, will be very interested at this stage of the race, seeing just sort of assess how Anderson's doing with a car right behind him. You don't have to make the move, but just put him under pressure. We've seen quite a few drivers so far not go for the move, but just stick really close behind that car in front and just wait to see if they make a mistake. And for some drivers, Tim Darracott, I think, has done a very good job of this. Twice we've seen him get past cars by just waiting for them to make mistakes. And as I say, maybe just come off track. He's now back up to 4th, so he's actually only 2 places down from where he started. Only 12 seconds off the lead, but I think with the pace that Tim Darracott's been showing around this track, must be wondering in that cockpit right now what could have been, because that could well be him now sort of sailing away in the lead, because he seemed pretty even with Jordan Johnson's pace in his Aston Martin. But here we have another driver who's having still a very solid race, but with Rich Cawthorne right behind them. It's Matt Terry, sorry, in the Matin pack, very much not living up to the team name, as he is driving 1st in GT3 Pro and 6th overall in GT3. But it's not just FTR Esports he's got to worry about. Justin Nair is still in the Stage 1 Racing Senior GT, just behind, just keeping them interested. But Matt Terry, I think, so far, and I really hope I'm not cursing him, he's looked pretty unflappable in that BMW so far. He hasn't made any mistakes, considering Rich Cawthorne is a very strong driver and has been within a second of him pretty much for the whole half hour of this race so far.
Well, indeed, I would agree with you there, and I think Rich Cawthorne now has to worry about the fact he has Justin Nair behind the Stage 1 Racing Senior GT driver, and that Lamborghini Huracan is literally hounding the back of Cawthorne, and the FTR Esports GT3 driver here will be very aware of the fact that anyone even makes the slightest of mistakes, and he is going to be seeing this Lamborghini coming through. And to be fair, the Dutchman has gained 4 places since the start of this race, P7 in the GT3 Pro class currently, and as they make the way downhill right now, it is one of those situations whereby there's no real overtaking opportunities here, but if Nair can keep this close coming down onto the Dottinger straight, there will be a major overtaking opportunity. But of course, it's saying it is one thing, achieving it is another, and he's halfway through the downhill sequence now as he makes his way through the corner known as YouTube Corner, as it's normally where we see a lot of the clips of people getting it wrong. As meanwhile, speaking of people not getting it wrong so far, our top 2 in the GT3 Pro class here of James Armstrong and also Sean Campbell, who are still only separated by 0.3 of a second as they come to the Dottinger for the 4th time of asking here. These two are flying, and now we'll get to see Sean Campbell closing up in the slipstream. I think Armstrong here is going to resign himself to the fact that he's going to have that Porsche coming on through, and Sean Campbell going for the move once again and giving a lot of space between the two of them as they make their way down this back straight. But as they come on through, in terms of those lap times, as you were talking about earlier, Chris, it is the case that these two are absolutely flying. They are, as you say, 8 seconds faster than anybody else in the GT3 field. And as they make their way side by side down the drop this time, who's going to come out on top? I think it's going to be Armstrong as he just sweeps back in front. But it's getting very nip and tuck between the two of them each and every time they come on through.
Oh, they really are. As producer Sean says in our ear, just shows you the trust these drivers have got with each other. I mean, they've driven around each other so much, and they're so quick and so in control of their cars that it's just nice to see you can have them driving that close. But I do wonder the sort of ramifications towards the end of the race. If these guys are still together, we saw there the Porsche doesn't have the straight line speed to be able to make that move stick down the back straight. So what do we do if Sean Campbell is second on the last lap trying to make that move again? Because it looks like, I don't think that would be enough for him to make it stick. So he's going to have to think of other ways to try and keep Armstrong behind him if he wants to win this race in 2 hours' time.
Oh, indeed. And as we see here, the battle for P6 with Justin Nair, they're getting very close and almost tapping the rear of his rival Cawthorne in the battle for P6 and GT3 Pro class. They all make the way across that timeline once again and go on to another lap. Another battle that we'll need to keep our eyes on is the battle for the touring car class lead, where Anderson is leading Chevalier by only half a second at this point in time. Those two have been running very close together for such a long time now. To be fair, they may not be as fast as GT3s, but the fact that these two have been running within a second of one another non-stop, and they they really have broken away. 5 seconds clear of Robinette in P3. And to give you an idea, they're lapping approximately 2 seconds a lap faster by comparison. It is the case that these guys seem to be trying to replicate what's happened at the front of the field overall within their own class. And right now, the FTR eSports TCR driver here closing up, but he's not going to be looking for the move, surely, as they make their way into the left-hander that comes to the end of the uphill run before the steel strecker. But as they roll on through, right now, it's all about biding time.
I think we've had a crash for Eric Biggs in the 49 Motorsports Magenta Aston Martin. Hopefully we can get you a replay of that if we can. But what I absolutely love, and you just touched on it there, is if you look at the overall class standings for all three classes, the biggest gap we have for the lead is Johnson and Blakesley in GT4, which is 2.5 seconds, which is... I don't think we've seen all three classes remain that close to each other in any of the rounds we've had so far, and I just want to revel in that while we can, because I think it shows you how confident these drivers are in their machinery, that they can drive this closely together. I mean, you see in GT3 there's very few drivers who are actually on their own entirely. There's just, you know, there's 2x2 or there's full train battles. It's only the GT4 field that's really been able to spread out, but you can sort of see pace disparity, like Tim Darracott, for example, a second quicker than Stephen Walkup last lap. So he will eventually catch him, but Matt Terry here looks like, is Rich Cawthorne going for the move? Not round the outside as we enter the Nordschleife. But you can see Mocek, Terry, Cawthorne, Naya, these four drivers have done a supremely good job so far of keeping it clean but keeping it competitive, and long may it continue.
Oh, indeed. And there's a certain irony to what you're saying there about the fact that our battles for lead in each of the three classes overall are so close together, and the fact we have the longest lap on the calendar here. And that's when you'd normally expect the gaps between the leaders to separate out the most, because this is really the circuit whereby if somebody really knows the circuit so well, they will open up and effectively dominate their class. But the fact that we've got a number of drivers here who are so confident in running close together in the car, that's what's fantastic. I completely 100% agree, Chris. And right now, the respect being shown between drivers and that patience as well, that key factor where you've got to wait for opportunities. We're hearing that Tom Jenkins has had a bit of an incident and has actually had to jump to the pits as a result of that, and we may be taking a look back at that shortly. But right now, Rich Crawford looking under a little bit of what is pressure here in the run all the way to Ehrenberg corner, and as they make their way into the braking zone here, will it be Terry or Crawford who come on through? They've got to go for the left-hander first, on long left, it's side by side and under braking, and Rich Crawford gets it done this time and following through. That's Justin Nair there, as Matt Terry, I think, quite sensible, recognising, you know what, the gig is up. It is the case that whilst he is the GT3 amp driver, keeping some of the GT3 pros behind him, now is the time to relinquish that advantage, because it's only going to get more nip and tuck as time goes on. And I think Terry's picked the right time to just move aside and let them run. As we take a look back at what's happened here, Chris.
Yep, this is what happened to Eric Biggs earlier that forced him to have to tow. He's going around the outside of the carousel, so I wonder if he's having some technical issues as well. That was a very, very odd crash as he goes into the barrier. And this is also what happened to Tom Jenkins for Track Limit Racing GT4. So has he carried too much speed coming up the hill here? Oh! Now that is, I think, is that where Sean Campbell had his jump earlier in the race, and that just shows you that, well, appreciate they're in different car classes, so the cars are going to react differently, but that car is, there's a very good reason that Tom Jenkins has towed that car is toast. Not a huge amount you can do when that happens, but you know, because you feel like you're under control and you're driving that car nice and quickly, and then that happens. But that just goes to show you that's why it's called the Green Hell, because it is just such a difficult track to lap on. For endurance racing, something will go wrong if you're not 100% focused 100% of the time.
Well, 100%. Now we focus on the battle. Well, we were looking at the battle for P for the TCR class, but we now come back to an even closer battle as James Armstrong. They have a little element of the rear sliding as they come towards the steel striker once again. And as they make their way to the braking zone, here you can see Armstrong actually defending under braking, so it's the case. Neither of them are relaxing right now. We love to see it as they make their way up towards the carousel, and as they head in towards the braking zone for the infamous corner, it is the case they can only go through in sequence, but still running nose to tail here. And Sean Campbell just keeping that pressure on. But as they make the way down and around, it's the case we come back to the battle for what is here, I believe, believe, the battle for P6 in the TCR class, and that's Raymond Aguilar, who has just been passed by Ethan Bass. And as they make their way down towards the end of their current lap, you can see Aguilar there having to back off on the brakes a little bit, just giving himself a bit of space in that Audi versus the Hyundai driver to make sure he doesn't tap the back of the Hyundai driver. And as they make their way on to another lap here, the pass has been made, but it could be the case that in the near future they end up swapping places again. It does look as though that Hyundai has a little bit more of a straight line speed advantage, but the Audi definitely very bold on the brakes and has the acceleration to go with it as they now go on to their 5th tour of the circuit under race pace conditions. But battling in this P6 position, we haven't seen too much from the Audis here today at the Nürburgring. They haven't quite been there, Chris, but it does seem as though Aguilar's trying to arrest that fact and trying to battle for the top 5.
Yes, now of course Ethan Bass has had to pit already and will have repaired some damage, so he is he's out of order in a sense, because he would have been expecting to be further up the field. But this track limit racing car, it's had its fair share of incidents as well. They're both about a minute off the lead of the class, as we see here with Mick Anderson, who is our leader. And I mean, you want to see two drivers who can't be separated at all. Anderson and Chevalier have both, on their previous turn round the circuit, both done 9:19.7s. They are separated by 100th of a second, and indeed their fastest laps are only separated by 500ths of a second. So I think, like what we're seeing with Anderson and Campbell in GT3, I think Armstrong and Campbell, Anderson and Chevalier, I think we're going to see this going till the end of the race. Now, of course, one consideration for these two is that Robinette for Driveline Sim Sport and Stadler for Brabham Esports Hissing Sid, they're only 8 seconds down the road. So if these two start battling too aggressively, they're going to drag two other supremely talented drivers into this battle. And of course, it also means if they take up any damage, that's that even if it only needs a few seconds to repair in the pit lane, it's just these are just things you need to keep in mind. You might well have the pace, but it does not take a huge amount to go wrong for all of that to evaporate. So let's see if these two are going to cooperate. It looks like Campbell has managed to get past Armstrong on the straight, and this time he's made it stick.
Oh my goodness, we wondered if he would be able to make it stick down the straight, and he's found a way on through here. Now the question will be, can Campbell hold it, particularly on the GP loop? Because if he can hold it for the GP loop, as they both come into the pits, they both decide it's time to come on in, and neither driver giving in, as we see to the replay here. And just take us through this, Chris.
Yep, so I think it's just going to be drafting, but interestingly he's opted to go to the left this time. Now, of course, we all know a basic understanding of physics. It's not like going left on the straight is actually any quicker, but I think what it's just done is it's just a bit of signalling to Armstrong. Actually, I do want to fight this. You can see there Campbell not leaving a car's width of room on the edge of the track, but he was fully ahead of Armstrong. So in my mind, that's not a block. It's just slightly aggressive, which is, if you're going to be leading a race around the Nürburgring in a GT3, you're going to have to get your elbows out at some point. It will be interesting to see, was Campbell able to fuel save behind Armstrong? Because for the bulk of that 40-minute stint, I would say that Armstrong was the leader. So it'll be interesting to see. And yeah, Campbell's come out first. He was a 0.6 quicker stop for the actual stopping time. Now it's going to mean nothing because Armstrong is literally in his draft, so they're going to fantastically, these two are going to stay out together. I don't believe we're going to see any GT3s able to get a 6th lap out, so expect to see everyone that didn't pit for damage they're all going to pit on this lap. Perhaps Crouch, Silliman, Ball or Linden, who are 14th to 17th in the field, they may well stay out because they had to pit on lap 1, 2 or 3. But once Roxy Gibson and Roberto De Filipis come in, that will be our entire GT3 field coming in. Now, another consideration there is that I think the GT3s were probably only a lap away from having to lap the TCRs. So I do wonder if there's an element of keeping that in mind, or if it's just a happy coincidence, because of course the TCRs are going to have to pit soon themselves anyway.
Well, indeed, it is something which we have to think about, particularly as we go deeper and deeper into this race, because should the GT3s then come up behind the traffic, and especially in those close battles such as between Campbell and Armstrong, how that will play out given the patience factor and the fact that when a move does come to lap one of the slower class cars, can both drivers come on through, or can the lead driver find a way to clear the back marker but not let his rival come on through with him? That will be the big challenge as we cut here to what is the battle for P the battle for P3 in the TCR class, and Harold Stadler here on the charge. We haven't talked too much about Stadler since the start of round number 4 here. The Brown eSports hissing Sid driver here, who's putting a very solid effort right now, chasing after Hayden Robinette. He has lost a place in the class since the start of this race. He did start P3, which dropped to P4. He's staying in the fight, and as they make the way up towards what is up towards the steel strike, I was going to give you a turn number there, but I was going to say there's more corners here than I've got fingers and toes combined, as they make the way all the way up into the very tricky right-hander, and Stadler keeping close for now, but I do wonder how long it'll be before they start to look at their respective pit stops, given the GT3s have already been in.
Exactly. We've had Yanis Allbear for Brabham Esports in YouTube chat. He's just saying Sean is running higher wings, so he won't be able to save too much fuel. At least that's from what they've observed. So that will be another. You know, you do wonder if, because he's driving the Porsche, if that's a decision he's been forced into doing. And you do wonder if that's perhaps one of the reasons why he's elected to try and get track position. But, you know, Campbell and Armstrong, very evenly matched drivers. So I don't think that it's going to be decided purely by one factor. It's going to be who gets the rub of the green at the right time. It might well be who copes with traffic better, because we've yet to see these two drivers have to deal with traffic. We also really, in this series as a whole, with this second season of the Sim 3D series, we haven't really had to see Sean Campbell contend with traffic while in a big battle. He's usually all out on his own, and I've often, you find in these races, if you're out on your own dealing with traffic, it's sort of the advantage compounds, because you're not having to take risks to try and keep up with the other driver. You can plan out, you can relax, you can just get those overtakes done nice and simply. I do wonder if when we come to lapping traffic this time, because these two are fighting each other, is that going to have an impact, as Tim Darracott for Effect Esports has just managed to get past Stephen Walkup in Brabham Esports Blue, and that is another overtake we've seen on the back straight. So let's have a look at how that happened.
Well, as the case in the draft here, and we'll look at the speed differential. Darracott versus Walkup as they made the way on down, and literally, and I hate to say this, it makes Walkup look stationary as Walkup's into the pits, and Darracott, I do believe, has also come in. So all four of our top four in the GT4 class coming on in, as we do watch here with Roy Mass now behind the wheel of the Stage 1 Racing Senior GT machine, and he's battling with Matt Terry, the GT3 AM leader, as they roll their way out for Arenberg Corner, and now head down towards Ardenau Forest. And as they head all the way down the hill, the long charge before the uphill run into the braking zone is the case. The Dutchman here, I think he's avoided a tricky situation of finding his way past the GT3 AM driver, who has shown a very closely matching pace, and Roy Mass here now trying to chase after what will be Corfraw, who is the best part of 5 seconds up the road, but they are exchanging lap time right now, although it should be to that last lap. Corfraw was 2 tenths of a second faster, almost 3 tenths faster, so I think that P5 position is gradually creeping away from him. But whilst all this is going on, one thing in the GT4 class to point out is that Daniel Muff has taken his pit stop and he's made his way back out to the circuit. Here's our leader in the GT4 class, who we're referring to for Deutsche Payment Def Moment, and as he rolls his way down around, it is the case that we can see here on with the Dottinger Straight. Well, Hayden Robinette there losing the place to what is Harold Stadler there, as the two have exchanged places, the two Hyundai drivers, as they come down towards the braking zone. Nothing between the two of them. We've got an incident involving Rich Corfraw that we'll take a look back at shortly, but as we do see the roll through here, Robinette has lost the place. Now, will we see them peel into the pits, or will they carry on? It looks as though they're both carrying on here. They've got the fuel to go at least another lap, and well, it's one of those situations where Stadler knows the pressure is building from Robinette. Robinette is literally following him, snake-tailing him down the straight. It'll be going around the outside here. It'll be a battle on the brakes for P3 in the TCR class. Into turn 1 they go. Can Robinette do it around the outside? It's going to be very nip and tuck here, and it looks as though their Stadler just manages to keep the door shut and does not let Robinette get that advantage as they roll their way through 2 and now head down towards turn 3 in the Mercedes arena. But Robinette not giving this one up, looking for a potential cutback run here, making Stadler have to go really slow to the apex of 3, and as they roll through 4, it does look as though right now Stadler just able to keep Robinette at bay, as the American driver needs to find another way to pass the German as they make their way down towards turns 5 and 6.
Yeah, this is very solid driving from the two TCR drivers here. Now, one thing to make note of is that because the GT4s have pitted a lap earlier than what the TCRs have needed to, it's really mixed the two fields up. So Backmarker Racing Orange, who are currently 8th in GT4. They are behind this battle between Anderson and Chevalier. They're going to have to try and make their way through. Ed Cookstack's currently at the wheel of that car, but also Jackson Lowry and Giovanni Romano for FTR Esports Black and Hugh Jass respectively. They're even further back. They're behind the battle we were just following between Stadler and Robinette. So that's another sting in the tail for some of these battles, and it's not what Stadler and Robinette would want. It's not what Anderson and Chevalier will want, because it's just, you know, drivers who are not a part of their race who will be trying to get through, and you know, they're all entitled to try and fight their own races, so it's just an extra stress that these drivers wouldn't have wanted at this stage of the race. Now, I think for Campbell and Armstrong, what they'll be hoping is that they can get onto their next lap before the TCRs get onto their pit lane, and they don't even have to worry about lapping them. But I have a feeling they've driven so quickly that we might find before the TCRs finish lap number 6, Sean and James are already starting their next lap, which would be, well, also their lap number 7, I think, by that point. But we'll have to see in about 5 minutes or so what happens with that, because that could, well, you know, very easily we could see an incident between the top 2 drivers there.
Indeed, I agree with you there. But as we cut back to our GT3 Pro drivers here battling for the lead, Sean Campbell on the right of your picture, and then Armstrong on the left of your picture, and the camera pans around now, and they swap their respective positions. We can see Armstrong back ahead here with Sean Campbell losing out in the straights once again, and it definitely does look as though that little bit of information that was gleaned in the YouTube chat, well, we can see that Sean Campbell does not seem to have that straight line speed versus Armstrong, and therefore is up against it down the dot in a hole. And I think it will come down to who is the first one to make the critical errors. They both make their way to the timeline here. They're side by side in the long run down towards turn number 1. It's Sean Campbell making his way ahead now. He's on the right of the pair on the outside as they make their way to the braking zone, and as they come towards the hairpin, both of them literally giving each other a hair's whip. Under braking they go, and it's Armstrong on the inside there who retakes the lead once again. He is holding on, but Sean Campbell is not letting this go as they roll the way through turn 2 and now head through the Mercedes arena. And well, I do think, Chris, it's going to be one of those cases where these two are just not going to let one another have any sort of breathing room.
No, this is incredible driving from the two of them, and I do think there's an element of ego at play. But let's have a look at what happened to the very unfortunate Rich Cawthron in the FTR Esports GT3. Now, they were running up as high as 5th at one point, and he's just lost it on the exit, and this is just what happens. That's only a very small issue, but this is the nature of green hell. He's, you know, that's that car. He's had to tow it to the pits. He's now been stopped for 4 minutes. He's behind the entire running field. It's not raced over, but I think that's, in terms of podium aspirations, that's that done. But this is what we were saying earlier about it's not necessarily all about raw pace. It's about, can you hang in there? And I was going to say earlier, for example, you know, this is true of several drivers, but I was going to pick out Roxy Gibson for Prismatic Minerva, someone I've driven in an F3 league with before as well. And I think Roxy would perhaps, well, she's got quicker than when we last drove together, but I think she'd agree she's not the quickest driver in the field today, but you don't need to be the quickest. She's gained 6 places. That's more than anyone around her has. And that's just from driving sensibly, that's driving smartly. I mean, head of the sister team of Prismatic Athena, driven by Cass Silliman. So it's a strong result. And with Brad Crouch of RPM Racing having to make their pit stop scheduled because they had damage after lap 2, that is going to be a 7th position gained from their starting position of 18th. Sorry. So yeah, it just goes to show raw pace isn't all that you need. And I do hope that no one finds it patronising when I say that they're slow and steady. I'm very much of the same mould, just to sort of throw myself under the bus with you.
And I'm with you there, Chris, as well. I completely agree with the philosophy of slow and steady wins the race at the end of the day. You may be able, where it's the case, you may be able to put in an absolutely stellar lap, but if you can't do over 2.5 hours and the car ends up in the wall, then it's worth very little. And that is being demonstrated by so many of our drivers here in terms of that consistency is what you need to win. As we do look to Trevor Anderson here, currently running P6 in the GT4 class for D-Line Racing. He has got James Holman literally behind him by only a couple of attempts, and as they make their way up to a Stillstrekker, it is the case that right now Trevor Anderson doing everything he can to keep the RD Simsport driver at bay, and you can see even little weaves here before the braking zone trying to break that toe. And Anderson really up against it here. The D-Line Racing driver has gained 2 places in the class since the start of this race, but it's been a case that he made a lot of early gains due to some good opening moves, but also the misfortune of others, and now starting to fall backwards a little bit. And it does seem as though his outright pace is being undermined. And to give you an idea, that last lap was a 9:11.53, whereas the case Stephen Walk up ahead a 9:07.42, and James Holman behind a 9:07.05. So I think Anderson right now are really starting to feel the pinch of the pace here. His best lap has been a 9:05.1, so he's got a lot of pace in that car, but right now he just does not seem to be able to extract the pace that his rivals around him have got as he now makes his way into the downhill run. Your thoughts on that, Chris, with regards to his pace?
I think James Holman's very quietly had a strong race. He's up 5 places from his starting 12. And as you say, he's going quickly. We haven't really seen him in that RD Sim Sport 258 make any moves. But you know, here we've got another couple of drivers who very quietly had good races, both up to 6 places. It's Roy Mars for Stage 1 Racing Senior GT and Josh Wiggins behind in the BMW in the RD Sim Sport. Now, the BMW does seem to be the sort of strongest all-round car for the GT3s. You know, not that the Lamborghini is without its merits, it's a good car itself, but perhaps just the extra stability that the BMW offers and sort of the confidence you can drive it with as a result, that might well be why we've got 3 BMWs in the top 5 and 4 in the top 7. And yeah, Josh Wiggins, I think, is looking like he wants to make a move. He's now within 0.2 of a second of Roy Mars, but you know, these are both very strong drivers. Wiggins just sticking the nose of that car on the inside there, just to sort of not really seriously looking for the move, but just to try and put Mars off, just to see, is he going to make a mistake? Is he going to sort of be spending too much time looking in the mirrors of the car? Rich Cawthron has finally finished that tow, is still just about ahead of the GT4s, but not for long as they now repair that damage. Oh, actually, I think they may well be out of the pits. So yeah, Cawthron at the back of the GT3 field, stopped for 8 minutes. That will really hurt, but small consolation is that is during the pit window, so it's not necessarily going to mean an extra pit stop in the grand scheme of things. But as you can see here again, James Armstrong has not been able to get away from Sean Campbell, has he, Paul?
No, he has not, and as they make their way to the end of the uphill run here into the Stillstrecker preceding the carousel, it is the case that right now Sean Campbell literally there in the wheel tracks every time, and as they make their way now into the braking zone here, we follow from the drone camera, and absolutely fantastic as they both go in here, and this is the ultimate picture, if you will, in endurance racing. It's seen 2 GT3s running nose to tail around the Nordschleife loop, and this is what we always want to see, how close it is as they come roaring on through and now start to make their way in to the descent from the very top of the summit of the circuit as they roll on through. But Armstrong right now does seem to have just enough to be able to be ahead at the end of each lap and going on to the next lap. But it is the case that Sean Campbell right there with him, and I think it is going to be nip and tuck between these two all the way. And in terms of where they are on circuit compared to the traffic, well, they are starting to come up behind a little bit of potential traffic. Some drivers who've had difficult races, they've got a GT4 in front of them there, which may start to play in. As you can see, it is the case that they have to just be biding their time, and you can see Sean Campbell literally latching himself to the back of the Bradman eSports drivers, BMW M4. He does not want to have any traffic between the two of them, even for one corner, because that could open up a gap that's enough to give Armstrong a breather, and well, he does not want any breathing room afforded to the Briton in front of him for the simple reason, in doing so, that could be the difference in the end. But I reckon give it approximately another 3 to 5 laps, and we will start to see them coming up behind some more serious traffic, and when that happens, that's when we will start to see this battle for the lead evolve even more. But still, we've got a lot of time to go. We're only approximately an hour in. We've still got 1.5 hours to go, and Armstrong and Campbell is building up to be a huge battle. It's almost as if it's the main card on a boxing night, Bill, if you will. But we've also got some other battles there on the card, such as Anderson versus Chevalier in the battle for the lead of the touring cars, and we've also got the question of how it will play out in the GT4 class, given that we saw that Murph had that incident. He's leading at the moment, but really Johnson and Blakesley, we believe, is the battle for the lead there.
Yeah, it's still all kicking off. We're now nearly an hour into this race, and I think, as we can say for sort of the battles that have been going in all of these divisions, they've been nip and tuck for an hour back to back now. It's draining enough to drive around the Nordschleife, it's even more draining when you're having to do it in tandem with another car. So this really speaks to the skill of the drivers we've got here. And this is another example, as it looks like Lowry and Romano have both managed to get past Stadler and Robinette. But one thing we've not picked up from what happened in the pit window was Tim Darracott in the Effect Esports car just before the pit window had managed to get ahead of Brandon Blakesley in the Vulcan Sim Racing car, and actually has had one of the quickest stops of anyone in the GT4 field. But it was the actual Darracott had a very slow stop, box to box. He was a second slower than Blakesley, and then therefore 3 seconds slower for the actual moving time within the pit lane, and that allowed Blakesley back past. And Darracott has been able to catch him back up in the preceding lap and a half, but he's not been able to find a way back past him. And we don't know exactly what it was that caused that slow stop for Darracott, but you just wonder if these small things can make a huge difference. As it looks like Armstrong and Campbell have perhaps traded positions again.
Well, indeed, they made their way down towards turn one. Campbell on the inside and Armstrong on the outside there. There's literally the tiniest bit of room. The respect between the two drivers is absolutely phenomenal. They came from the Mercedes arena, and Sean Campbell trying to go all the way around the outside, coming down into turn number 3 and literally go for the cutback there at the last possible moment. Only switching then to the outside line through 4. But you can see Armstrong there running a bit wide, in fact, with a track limits excursion. Hasn't cost him too dearly, but the two of them, well, it is the case. They respect one another so clearly. You can see that in the body language of the cars, able to run so close but never graze one another. And well, fantastic as they continue around the circuit. We cut back to Darracott, and your point there, Chris, with regards to the speed which Darracott is demonstrating right now as he continues to chase down Blakesley. Looking at the lap times, Darracott is outpacing by approximately 2 seconds a lap both Blakesley and Johnson, and if it continues at this rate and he's able to find a way past, it could be the case that right now we are looking at a potential leader in the class. Even though he had that instant on the opening lap, it's not as though it's gone away from it, it's only motivated him more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and it's also worth pointing out that Muth in the lead of GT4 is actually sort of out of sync with the pit stops because he had to pit for damage. He'll need to pit again unless he's exceptionally lucky with fuel working out by the end of the race. So in effect, Johnson is the leader of the GT4 class, and this battle Blakesley-Darracott walk-up, that is actually for second. But as we get to the hour stage of this race, it's time for us to bring you a word from the sponsors of this series. So that is Sim3D, enhancing your sim racing experience, custom designed parts with the sim racer in mind for both durability and ease of use. All of Sim3D's products are made to order, designed by sim racers for sim racers, and you can head to www.sim-3d.co.uk to find out more. All of their links can be found in the YouTube description on the Total Sim Sport YouTube channel. And of course, let's not forget Go for the Gap as well. Find the very best F1 and motorsport art and graphics. Get over to the store on Etsy now and use the code 10TOOLSIMSPORT for 10% off motorsport prints. That's 10TAL SimSport, all one word, for motorsport prints. That is www.etsy.com/shop/go for the gap. Head over to @GoForTheGapCo on Twitter for more information, and as with Sim3D, all of the links can be found in the YouTube description and on the Total SimSport YouTube channel. And a big thank you to both of them for sponsoring this incredible Sim3D series. And Paul, as we're at the hour landmark, would you like to go through our standings so far?
Indeed, I'm happy to go through them, Chris. And well, it is the case that so far in the GT3 class, overall, we have James Armstrong leading, as we see him here in the camera shot, leading only by 2/10 of a second. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. After an hour of racing here at the Nordschleife GP Luke combined, it is 2/10 of a second separating James Armstrong and Sean Campbell in the battle for the overall lead and also the GT3 Pro class. They then have Evan Peichel behind them, 52 seconds behind in P3, as we see Evan Peichel here, the Alpine Stars GD6 racing driver, who has started to open a gap versus Anthony Tuominen, who is running in P4. Tuominen, one of our biggest gainers at the start of the GT3 class, and now those gains are starting to turn more into focus to the end of his race as he continues to press on. And then we have our leader in the GT3 AM class here, Matt Terry, the Matt in Black driver, who really has been flying compared to his GT3 AM peers. And he's also been having to fend off the likes of Roy Mass, who running in P6 overall right now, the GT3 Pro driver from Stage 1 at Racing Senior GT has started to settle down after breaking away from Thomas Mosek, the JD Sim Racing 76 driver, who in the Ferrari here running on through in a rather distinguished livery and one of a lonely Ferrari in this race as he makes his way on around right now. Keep your eyes on him, he's pressing on, as behind we have Ian Luo there changing places with Kees Iserman as the backmarker of racing yellow driver here from the Netherlands moves his way out to P8 overall, passing Io Luo there, the Sim Racing Grid M4 driver, as he rolls his way through in the number 191 car in P9. That's P2 in the GT3 M class. We then got in P10 Roxy Gibson running a really strong race, and we talked about this earlier, the consistency really shining through for Roxy Gibson in the Prismatic Motorsports Minerva machine. And just behind Roxy at the moment we do have Roberto Di Filippis battling for position in the GT3 AM class, the Scania Endurance Motorsport, and having gained 8 places since the start. Huge gains made by both drivers. They both gained 8 places to be fair, and they are pressing on in that pursuit of the final podium spot. P12 we have Brad Crouch here, the RPM Racing driver, who had quite a bit of pace early on, and he has gained a couple of places, but he's sort of hit a bit of a no man's land now. We're waiting to see what he can deliver in the remainder of the race. Then in P13 Peter Brien from RD Simsport, he's taken over the car, and as he makes his way through, it is the case he's picking up from where Josh Wiggins has left off. And then we do have in P14 Bree Widener there, the Prismatic Motorsports Athena driver, pressing on and continue to roll on through in the GT3 Pro Class, 3 places gained since the start. Behind it, we have Simon Ball there, the Track Limit Racing GT3 at 911 driver. Keeping in mind that Simon Ball having made 2 stops already due to a disastrous start to the race, which saw damage being picked up and having to recover this. He's recovered quite well so far. And we have Timothy van der Broek there, the Stage 1 Racing Green driver, continuing to press on with that disastrous start to the race as well. 2 stops to his name. He's currently in P16. We then have P17 here, Rich Crawford, the FTR Esports GT3 driver with that massive toe to the pits, and he's now having to recover this race, the BMW M4 driver, P17. And then we have the first of our GT4 drivers, our leader in the GT4 class, Daniel Murphy, the Deutsche Payment Def Omen driver, but we have to point out he's a little bit out of sequence compared to his peers because he has made 1 stop, and he made it quite early due to a moment in the downhill run after the carousel, getting it wrong, and as a result he's actually out of sequence, so we're not sure where he fits into the wider picture. We're keeping our eyes on him as meanwhile in P2 in the class, P19 overall, and who we believe is our effective strategic leader until proven, that is Jordan Johnson here for Orbit Motorsport Venus, the American driver right now running that P19 position, but he's not too far away from Tim Darracott here. Keeping in mind that the effective esports driver lost it at turn 2 on the opening lap and has come all the way through the GT4 field, all the way back up to P3 in the class, and that is P20, and he is charging right now, closing down Jordan Johnson, and we'll be expecting a battle between them later on in this race. We then have P21 Stephen Walkup here, the Brabham Esports Blue driver, who is under a bit of pressure from what is Brandon Blakesley behind the Vulcan Sim Racing driver as they squabble over P21, P4 in the GT4 class, rolling on through the hairpin there in sequence. And then we have James Holman from RD Simsport 258 as he makes his way around P23, 6th in class, ahead of Trevor Anderson, the D-Line Racing driver here at P24. And then we have Ed Kukustas here, the backmarker racing orange driver, P8 in the Porsche 718 Cayman GT4, the first of Porsches, ahead of Giovanni Romano in the P9 position in the class there, and mowing his way through, and behind being chased by Jackson Lowry, slowly going backwards in the Porsche, not through a fault of his own, just the car does not seem to have the pace here. And then we have P11 in the class, Eric Biggs in the 49 Motorsports Magenta machine as he makes his way on around. And then we do cut a little bit further down the order in terms of our TCR class. We'll come to them shortly, actually. We have Tom Jenkins here, ran P12 in the GT4 class currently. He's P38 overall, trying to recover this race for Track Limit Racing GT4. And then we do look to Hayden Robinette here, our leader in the TCR class, in the pits at the moment as our TCR drivers finally make their pit stop. I think this is all going to chop and change as we have coming on past it. That's Christopher Cook and also Mick Anderson, as in fact our leader in the class is Christopher Cook after their first round of pit stops, the FTR Esports TCR driver, and he's only less than a second ahead of Mick Anderson right now from RD Simsport 3. And these two drivers have been running, much like our leaders in the GT3 class, they've been running only a second, if not less apart, for all of this race today. And as they emerge from the pits, we believe the story will continue in that battle for the TCR lead as they roll away through the Mercedes arena. We then have Harold Stadler in the Brabham Esports hitting Sid machine in P3 in the class here, putting in a very good performance. And that pit stop has seen him actually gain a gap on Hayden Hayden Robinette, who's in P4, who we saw earlier come out the pits, and now Hayden Robinette's got Ethan Bass behind, who's putting a lot of pressure on here in P5 in the class, P32 overall, and as they battle their way on out, it is the case they roll the way out of Mercedes Arena and head down towards turn number 5, and as they make the way, Ethan Bass takes the position, he goes round the outside there. It looks like Robinette actually backed out a little bit, I think thinking about getting the tyres up to temperature before going to war for the position. And then we do have behind the pair of them Daniel Martin from RD Simsport 2 running P6 in the class, P33 overall, and having made his pit stop quite recently, trying to catch up to the top 5. And then we have Lilac Zia running P7 in the class for P36 overall, just emerging from the pit lane. The Prismatic Motorsports Academy driver here putting in a good performance, albeit trying to now chase down the top 6. And then we have in P8, and currently I believe in the pit lane, we have James Carr, that's P37 overall, the Canadian driver up on the jacks right now, much like his rival of Robert Gilbert behind, who's running P9 in the class, P38 overall. And I believe that covers our TCR class. And then the only other drivers we have to consider behind are the drivers who've had disastrous races so far. And in fact, they've had, I believe it's the case that they're not out on circuit. That's Gareth Higgins, Tom Mount, Chris Barrett, Alex Marsh-King, Brian Speicherman, and Kevin DeVale, who have all retired from this race. And that is your order after just over an hour of racing. We've still got 1 hour and 21 minutes to go.
Stuff, thank you, Paul. And I believe we can now talk to Landon Patmore of the of the Sim Racing Grid M4 team. Now, Ian Luo, currently in P8, didn't actually manage to set a qualifying time. How you feel, Landon? I'm presuming this is where you feel you should be now. He's managed to gain 13 places. He's up into 8th place and 2nd in GT3 AM. Disastrous qualifying, but good race so far. Is that a fair summation?
So actually, we had a slight problem actually during qualifying, and I just found this out for the couple years I've done iRacing. If you accidentally get in the car and then get out, you have to do qualifying, and unfortunately, I had hit a button on my wheel, and I was the one doing qualifying, and I'm not the better racer of the two of us. And I was actually the one that actually screwed up qualifying. But with Ian's pace and us staying clean, I definitely say this is probably where we should be.
iRacing don't do us any favours sometimes with these slightly hidden away rules, because I'm not sure we could have foreseen that. And speaking from experience, it's not that easy to get a 0x lap round the Nürburgring, especially when you're not expecting to have to do it.
No, definitely not. And funny enough for myself, this is actually the first time I've ever actually ran at the Nürburgring, in any capacity. Even that last race, at the GP circuit, I mean, same thing. So, you know, getting to 0x is probably easier for me to do than anybody else. It's unfortunate. But again, the pace and just staying clean, looks like, Ian's doing a fantastic job right now.
How are you guys finding the BMW? We were speculating earlier that because it's the most stable of the GT3s, that's an advantage around what is a very bumpy track. Would you say Ian's finding that the case so far, and yourself as well, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely ride the curbs pretty hard. You know, we definitely found that out back in Montreal last time around. Yeah, I mean, again, it's pretty understeery, but to our driving and how we like to drive, it works for us. I think the only thing is that we're down on top speed just with the setup we have. Again, you know, we can see that, you know, there's a BMW in first, so clearly there's pace there. It just it seems like we're just kind of petering out, especially in these long straights like where we are now, and we just can't keep up with the guys ahead.
Even so, I think gaining 13 places isn't to be sniffed at. Are you driving later, or is Ian doing the entire race?
Oh no, I'll be in. We probably got another 2 laps like everybody else until I hop in, and then I'll be finishing it out.
Are you looking forward to it? Are you feeling quite nervous at this point?
Definitely a bit nervous. I'm not gonna lie, especially seeing how easily everything can go wrong on this track, and you know, with the effort that Ian's putting in and has put in, you know, I just don't want to be that person that undoes all of it. So I'll definitely take it a little slower than I probably would. You know, just got to remember some of the turns here and there.
It's very much a baptism of fire. Thank you for talking to us, Landon. I'll go and let you prepare for your stint. Good luck. We wish you all the luck for later, and I hope you enjoy your first race around the Green Hell.
Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you guys. Talk around.
Cheers. That
Everything's
was
down,
Landon
so he's
Patmore.
getting ready. So after you, Chris.
Sorry, that was Landon Patmore of Sim Racing Grid M4, and I must say that's very brave of him to admit that this is his first ever race around here. If it were me, I would be extremely nervous right now. I'm sure he'll be fine, and Ian's given him a nice 45-second gap back to Roxy Gibson and Roberto De Felippis, who are next in the GT3 field. But like he says, all it takes is one slip and the race is done. So let's hope that doesn't happen, because we're getting some very good battling out on track.
Oh, most definitely. And I think for him, all he's got to do, as you're saying, just backing it off slightly, run the car about 90% of what its maximum pace is, according to what he feels the car can do. And I think he will be safe. And as you say, it's got a lot of gap there to play with, the best part of 40+ seconds. So it's not as though there's a huge amount of pressure rest of his shoulders. It's more of a job now, a job in consistency, and get the car home in that P2 in class. And that'll be a great result for the team in the GT3 AM class. And well, I think a number of drivers now may be starting to feel that, particularly when we get to that second round of pit stops being complete. There'll be some drivers, of course, who are going to be close to their opponents on the circuit and wanting to push, but there'll also be those who have a 20-second gap to the driver ahead and the driver behind. They'll be thinking to themselves, you know what, we're going to have to consolidate this position now and just see what we can take, and the consistency will be key to that.
Oh yes, exactly. And Daniel Muth has just got out the Deutsche Payment Death Omen car. Ben Kelly McCauley, who is himself a very quick driver, has got in. But what that has done is promoted Jordan Johnson in the Orbit Motorsport Venus car to the lead of the GT4 field, as we see this fight here between Mocek and Eiserman, GT Sim Racing and Backmarker Yellow, as they get round one of the Astons. I believe that is Tom Jenkins of Track Limit Racing GT4, who is a bit down on pace. They'll have Eric Biggs for company next. But yeah, Johnson and Darracott are now within a second of each other, and they are now fighting for the lead of GT4. Darracott able to clear walk-up in the last couple of laps. Darracott lapping a good 2 seconds a lap quicker than everyone else. The last lap he's done an 8:58.92, the fastest lap of the race. It's the fastest lap of anyone in the GT4 field. And he was 2 seconds a lap quicker than the lap before that when he did a 9-minute flat than Johnson and walk up as well. So Darracott is definitely showing that he qualified second on merit, and he's been rewarded for his excellent fight through the field. He's up to second now. It'll be interesting to see if Alistair Catchpole's getting in the car later, or if Tim Darracott's doing this entire race himself. Their teammate Paul Busby is out in actual Le Mans right now, and I know Paul reasonably well. He's in no condition to drive right now, and I'm not just saying that because I'm jealous, but we are all rather jealous of him and our co-commentator Tim Cox, who have gone out to watch Le Mans. But I think the real exciting endurance race is right here at the Nürburgring this evening.
I completely agree with you, Chris. I think the excitement is here right now, and well, focusing on Darracott in particular, the pace he's showing, he's within 6/10 of Johnson and pressing on. And as he closes up, this is one battle for the lead that is building up to a crescendo. Whereas I should point out, whilst all this has been going on, Armstrong and Campbell in the battle for the GT3 Pro lead, that gap has actually opened up to 3 seconds now. And I think it's the case that they have actually encountered some traffic, and that has caused the gap between the two of them to open up, with Campbell having a lap that was almost 3 seconds slower than Armstrong that last time around. But Darracott right now inching ever closer, and well, if it's the case that he's going to be handing over the car to his teammate after this stint, I can tell you one thing right now, it will be the case that his teammate will have a lot of pressure on his shoulders, because I think Darracott will say, right, I've done all the hard work, you can just bring the car home right now, no pressure at all. And although they're teammates, there might be a bit of banter. I think that might be on the mind of his teammate.
And while we've been following this, Sean Campbell, I believe in the desperate attempt to get back up to the back of Armstrong, has just done an 8:12.12, which is 4 tenths quicker than I think James Armstrong's last lap was faster than his best lap, but wasn't a clean lap, because James Armstrong's cleanest best lap is a 1.5 seconds slower, but he'd also done an 8:12. So it's just a case of, I think Sean Campbell is driving quickly and cleanly. James Armstrong is perhaps not so fussed about taking those occasional off tracks in the name of pace. But yeah, it looks like Sean Campbell, as you say, I think struggled with the traffic a little bit, or just got a little bit unlucky with it. And like we were saying earlier, it doesn't necessarily matter what your raw pace is. If the traffic gets in your way, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault sometimes, that can be the difference between second or first place. But I don't think I've ever got an hour and a quarter into an endurance race and had the biggest gap for any class lead be 3 seconds or fewer. It's pretty incredible. And this is Eric Biggs in the 49 Motorsports Magenta, who's had, I think it's fair to say, an eventful race, and I think just exploring the limits of the track there as he comes through the stadium section. But That car doesn't look entirely settled, I would say, but he's keeping it going, and he's still in P11 for GT4s, but is about a minute behind James Holman, who is next in class. So it is it's unlikely he's going to catch. And our co-commentator from earlier on the race, Seb Bosher-Williams, has just hopped in that back marker racing yellow car. We'll see if he's got the pace that he had round Canada, where he was mixing it up for the lead at one stage. Seb is, as we all know, a pretty talented driver and an excellent broadcaster. So it is time for us to throw him under the bus for an hour and a quarter.
Oh, indeed. No pressure on Seb, although we do wish him when we wish all our drivers the best luck. We can't play favourites here in the commentary box unless, of course, anybody slid us any £5 notes underneath the door before the racing today. Nobody does that, of course, as we do look to see a Roxy Gibson here running in that P3 position in the GT3M class here, and still holding off what is Roberto De Filipis, indeed the Prismatic Motorsports Minerva driver here, putting in a very solid run, but the Scania Endurance Motorsport driver also keeping it well within the wheel tracks. And these two have been running in this battle for P3 for quite some time. The gap between them has stayed around the margin of what it is now, around that 1 second margin, and it does seem as though that as soon as getting into that dirty air of the back of the Prismatic Motorsports Minerva machine, that Filipis just cannot quite do enough from that point onwards to close the gap further. But I think it's also a testament to Gibson's ability here. The British driver definitely keeping the Lamborghini Huracan at bay and flying on through. And well, there's still a lot of time in this race to go. There's still plenty of ways the story can play on out, as it does look as though that gap is inching just a little bit closer. In fact, the gap now coming down to half a second as they make their way up towards the Velo chicane. They've got a little bit of traffic ahead of them as well in the form of one of the TCR machines, which may play into this. And as they make their way through, well, that is another one of the Prismatic machines, in fact, so that's probably the worst traffic to catch up when it's a slow car, but it's also your teammate in another class. But as they make their way over through, it does seem to be the case that the TCR Prismatic machine moves aside and lets Bo through not get involved in this. And as they roll their way through Sabine Schmidt curve, once again, it's the case now they go onto loop, and this is where Gibson will feel that pressure, but at the same time has that consolidated, that consoling factor that overtaking here on the Nordschleife loop is a bit harder. As we ride on board with the Scania Endurance Motorsport driver here, Chris, and just take us through this run as they make their way through.
You can see, I think Roberto De Filipis right now has got a little bit more confidence than Roxy Gibson coming through the start of the Nordschleife section of the track. This is very tricky, this section, especially on the earlier laps on the stim, just because quite blind, quite bumpy corners as we're coming up through here, and then a nice long straight. As you can see, I think Gibson able to get a better exit, so De Filipis not really able to take huge advantage of the draft, although even if you are right on the bumper of the car in front, there aren't really any solid overtaking spots until we get to Arenberg, which is a pretty deep braking zone, but doesn't look like we're going to be close enough to see a move there. And I don't really think you want to be making any moves after that for quite a while. As you can see here, De Filipis not really catching Gibson except in those corners, and it's all well and good having superior cornering speed, but that's not going to be the place you make the overtakes pretty much on the entire rest of the lap as we go back to Tim Darracott, still in P2, but getting ever so closer to Johnson in the Orbit Motorsport car. They're only half a second apart now, and there's Walkup and Blakesley only 7 seconds down the road in their own mini battle as well. It will be interesting to see, does Tim Darracott want to make that move before we pit again in a lap and a bit, if we're going to pit at the same pace that we did in the last set of stops. Possibly only 2 stops left for the GT4s, I think, looking at where we are currently in the race event. I think the last stint may be a slightly shorter one for them if all goes to plan. So the lack of safety cars may be allowing the driver teams just to sort of work out their strategy a little bit differently, not having to worry about if safety cars are going to change their role just for this one round, where obviously the lap is so long they've been disabled.
Oh, indeed. And as we see Darracott here coming down onto the Dottenhurst straight, he's in the tow here, and I'm going to wager, Chris, that he'll go for the move early. He won't wait to the pit stop for the simple reason that I think he feels he's got the pace. And as we look here from the drone camera, watching the two of them, and Darracott definitely in the tow, building up that speed and now getting up to the highest possible speed he'll ever get on this straight with the slipstream. It looks as though he's just going to inch ahead, and we will see him return. Johnson tucking in, and Darracott immediately weaving to what is the left-hand side of the track there to try and cut off what toe there is a forward and also covers that inside line. But now as they come down to the braking zone here for what is the final couple of corners, it's that long, twisty trail braking zone. And as they make their way through it, I think Darracot's got the place at hand. But will they go on to another lap? Will they come round to the pits? We think they're going to go on to another lap. We'll wait and see. They do go on to another lap, and Darracot has to defend. Now he holds all the way to the inside wall. They're literally being forced almost onto that curbing, and as they make their way across the timeline down towards turn 1 they go. It's going to be a battle on the brakes here, and Johnson will want to come back, not give Darracot the opportunity to take the lead and run with it, but Darracot covers off the inside. It's all about parking the car on the apex. He does so. He leaves the door open slightly, and behind here we do have the battle between Walkup and Blakesley on the outside of the pitch there, Walkup on the inside, but Walkup overextends beyond the apex, but he brings it back together very nicely, and we have had changes for the lead, but the battle for the lead continues here with Johnson having a much... Oh, goodness me, is that contact between the two? It looks as though it's a bit of latency contact.
Yeah, that looked like a netcode to me. Darracot having no luck today. I'll be interested to see what the stewards make of that. They haven't had a huge amount to do, and of course we've decided to curse them by pointing it out. So poor James Rivet will be tearing his hair out in the stewards booth. I wouldn't want to have to make a decision on that because, to be honest, if you ignore the latency, enough room was left there, and Tim Darracot, so unfortunate. I mean, it was aggressive driving, but when you're going for the lead, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. And it's definitely a netcode contact, and there was certainly enough room. I know I could understand Tim Darracot turning in there, and you know, based on what he would have seen, he had enough room, and it would have. You hate to see it. We've been spoiled with such good racing, and then for the laws of physics to take it away from us is cruel. If only the speed of light could be quicker.
Oh, indeed. It is one of those unfortunate moments, but I think for Darracot right now, he's dropped back to 5 seconds off of Johnson, but we've still got just over an hour to go, and given the relative rate of closure, we have normally seen that Darracot closing by at least a second, if not 2 a lap, and there's enough laps in the race still for him to close up, so we will keep our eagle eyes on that, and whether he can come back once again. And Walkup has managed to get roughly half a second ahead of Blakesley. We're looking at and what is Brandon Blakesley for Vulcan Sim Racing right now in that hunt for P3 in the GT4 class as they roll their way onto the Nordschleife loop here and heading up towards Sabine Schmidt curve. And I think at this point they will both see Darracot right in front. I think, well, we're not sure what's happened to Darracot, but the Effect Esports driver is now fair game as they roll their way on through the corners. But it is the case, I think, for Darracot, he's just got to get his head down and push on once again as they make their way further in to this lap. But as they come on through here, we do now pan to James Armstrong, our leader in the GT3 class, the GT3 Pro class in particular, and as he runs a little bit wide there, Sean Campbell is still 2.9 seconds back, and Sean Campbell has not really closed up at all since setting that fastest lap. The gap has stayed stationary, as meanwhile into the pit lane have come Evan Pekel, also Matt Terry, Antti Tuominen, and also Thomas Motek. So it is the case right now, I think these two both trying to go 1 lap longer compared to their peers, so that way they shorten that last stint, as we do see in the TCR class. Meanwhile, this is the battle for what is there, unless I'm very much mistaken, P3, with what is Stadler holding off Ethan Bass, but Bass going to the inside. And as they make their way under braking, it's Ethan Bass who's up the inside. He goes overly deep, however, and well, that's going to afford what is Harold Stadler's opportunity. But Stadler's going to go all the way around the outside if he wants this. And Ethan Bass is covering it off very well despite the mistake. And well, the Orbit Motorsport Mars driver may have outbroke himself into the corner, but he's outbroke himself into the podium position right now as he rolls his way out of the Mercedes arena.
I think that was deliberate from Bass. I think he deliberately went wide knowing he'd have the inside, but I think we might now be able to talk to team manager for the 3 Prismatic teams on the track today, Jessica Martin. Jess, how are you getting on?
Well, after a bit of a nervy start, I tell you what, I am absolutely bouncing for Roxy in the GT3 AM category. Just incredibly excited.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's up 9 places, just gone into the pits now. Are we swapping drivers in that car, or is it going to be Roxy to the end?
Roxy to the end.
She's doing the entire. That's, I mean, braver than I would be. 2.5. I remember racing with Roxy in an F3 league almost 2 years ago now. It would have been, and yeah, slow but steady, I would have said at that stage. But she's definitely got quicker than that since then. Roberto De Filippis is a very quick driver, able to keep him behind for that entire stint. That was some very solid driving from Roxy so far.
Absolutely. I mean, she's been practicing so much for this race, so much for the Nürburgring, for the Nordschleife. I mean, I said earlier she put in around, I'd say 12 or 14 hours before this race, trying to do as much as she can, and she's put in an absolutely phenomenal job so far, and she's just been well within. She's just blown herself out of the water, and I'm really happy for her.
It's been very good so far, but mixed fortunes in the GT3 with the Athena car getting a victim to the green hell, I believe it was, on lap 1 or 2, and a bit of a recovery drive so far by comparison.
Yeah, unfortunately that was the case. We didn't qualify very well in either car, and unfortunately the Athena car was, lap 1 was subject to an incident, which we ended up catching RPM in that unintentionally. Then off the back of that, we came in, we decided to use the quick repair, but iRacing decided no, we hadn't used the quick repair, so we had to pit the end of the next lap, because without it we would have continued to lose time on the leaders. So now we've decided, with Bree in the car, we're just going to see this race out, we're just going to watch and just monitor how everything is progressing.
You know, it's always valuable track time. And how's Lilac getting on for the academy team in the Hyundai? We noticed a few laps ago behaving very well as traffic when the other prismatic car came through. There wasn't any temptation for some sneaky team orders there, was there?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Even if there was, I would have to keep myself very quiet because of the rule book.
Yeah. Sorry, yes, I'm being very unfair there. But, Lilac's having a good race.
Don't often. Lilac is honestly, she seems to be rather happy, considering that she didn't get her shot to post a time. iRacing was a bit cruel as she crossed the line and didn't actually take the time. But she's done everything she needs. She's stayed consistent. She's kept herself out of trouble, and she's done a fantastic job off the back of that.
Exactly. I think at the end of the day, around the Nürburgring, that's all you can really ask for. Is anyone from the team sort of looking on at Armstrong and Campbell's pace and sort of wondering, as we are a bit, how on earth is that possible?
None of us are. I'm not surprised. To be honest with you, like I said, we've had plenty of conversations with Sean, or more specifically, Emily Howe has had a lot of conversations with Sean. We know what is now Brabham very well. We were very close, and we were a rival last season. So we knew and we expected they were going to be lightning fast. But hey, it only just proves it. They're a bit superhuman, really.
And just to bring it back on topic for Prismatic, I'm imagining with her minute-long stop, Roxy's just taken tyres in that stop there. Do you think that's going to sort of pay advantage in about 50 minutes' time, where we've got some GT3s, by the looks of it, attempting to do the entire race on one set of tyres? You're looking to perhaps take advantage of the extra stability that offers?
Absolutely. The one thing we've noticed is that the track temp is actually it's pretty warm. So because of that, we're seeing a decent amount of wear in the tyres. And I know that Roxy had, about 20-30 minutes ago, been mentioning about the fact the car was very loose. So this hopefully gives her the confidence just to bring that gap in on Bull, on De Filipis, and take that podium back. She certainly is in a position to control that.
Well, we'll be cheering her on as much as we can as neutrals. It's certainly nice to sort of follow the narrative of some of the drivers, and we wish all three of your teams good luck for the race, and have a good one.
Best of luck to you all.
Cheers. That was Jessica Martin, team manager for the three prismatic teams we got on the grid today. And it seems, Paul, that we're finally having a bit of a calm moment as the stewards have decided that the Effect eSports and Orbit incident, that they're not taking action because there was too much netcode involved. How do you feel about that? I personally think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think so. I've got to agree with the stewards that it's a very difficult one to call, as we do see here Brabham Esports Blue, Stephen Walkup coming on in and literally battling to the braking line there for the pit limiter versus what is Tim Darracott in front. But coming on to your question there, As we take a look here, an accident involving Ed Kukustas as the backmarker racing orange driver getting it wrong at the Clyde carousel. Oh, goodness me. And a tap to the rear there from the other Porsche of Jackson Lowry in the FTR Esports GT4 black driver. Fortunate enough to get away there with a tap to the rear, and Kukustas, they're just getting it wrong. And, well, that was very unfortunate. Be able to soldier it back to the pits. That's the good news for him. But I do wonder as well whether Jackson Lowry will have some damage that's going to need a repair, or can he soldier on with regards to damage he's got. But coming back again to the discussion point, I think the stewards have called it right, and I think for them to swing particularly in the favour of one driver would be unfair, given how that contact seemed to be more netcode than actual physical contact between the cars. So they've nailed that, and it has been pretty calm for the stewards, to be fair, in this race. We did see some incidents earlier on where some warnings were given out and whatnot, but since those early moments and the occasional intervention, we haven't seen too much. And I think that's really testament not just to the racing here today, but also the calibre of the drivers in this league.
Yeah, I mean, the fact we've only had the 7 retirements, I believe, as it is, for just how difficult this circuit is, it really is impressive. You sort of compare this to what iRacing official series can be like sometimes. Coming from an open wheel background, I could talk all day about driving standards in iRacing officials, but by comparison, this has been phenomenally clean from nearly everyone. And like you say, all of these incidents we've seen, the sort of secondary contact, there's not really anything the other driver can do, because the track is so narrow, so quick, and so technical. It's not like there's anywhere they can put their car to not hit the other person. So I think we've done well to get away with as little damage as we have so far. But it would be a shame if it does affect any of the sort of lead drivers. As Steve Walkup, who was in sort of provisional 3rd in GT4, is off the track now. I wonder if that was involving Alistair Catspole in the Effect Esports car. We'll get a replay of that now, so let's see what's happened to the Brabham Esports blue team. Have they just taken a bit too much curb, and I guess he can count his lucky stars he's done it on the GP section of the track, because if he'd done that round the Nordschleife, that car would be severely damaged right now, and he'd have done more than just lost out about 10 seconds on catch pole in the Effect Esports car.
100%. And as we come back to live pictures, we're continuing to watch that battle for what is 3rd place in the TCR class. We can see ahead we do have an exchange going on between 2 of our GT3s, but Stadler right now are battling for that position with Ethan Bass again. They go side by side as they go up towards the Bilstein billboard, and as they make their way through, Stadler on what is the left of your picture. Then we have Bass on the right as the camera now pans around and flips their places on screen, and as they make their way down towards the final 2 corners here into that braking zone, Stadler takes the lead of this battle. But these two have been battling one another nose to tail throughout this entire race, really since the opening 45 minutes was complete. They have been running like this, and well, as they make the way to the timeline there, we see peeling into the pit, that is Bass coming on in. I believe even Bass has already made 1 stop, so this is a 2nd stop. I wonder what this would be for, because most of our TCR drivers have already only made 1 stop.
Yeah, I do wonder if they are slightly out of sync in TCR, because their sort of stop length, as it were, or sort of stint length, they're going to have to stop, I think 3 times in total. Oh, this would be the final stop, but everyone else is going to have to stop as well. So I guess Orbit have opted to take their small stop now, rather than sort of do 2 long stops and then a short one. Now, you would say if we were running safety cars, that would be perhaps a very risky strategy, but with safety cars disabled due to the track length, I suspect that this shouldn't have the same level of risk anyway. And what it might do, if they believe that they've got decent pace but just need some spare track to do it in, if they can now just run quickly on their own, this is a good opportunity for Orbit to try and make up some space. You know, the margins at the top of the TCR field are very small, so let's see if this alternate strategy works out for them.
Indeed, we'll have to wait and find out. It shouldn't be too long. It should be just 1 or 2 more laps before we see how it all plays out in the sphere of strategy. But meanwhile, we focus here on Peter Bryan from RD Simsport, who has recently moved up to what is overall a P7 in the GT3 class and running P7 as well in the GT3 Pro class specifically. He just found his way ahead of Matt Terry, the matte and black driver in the GT3 M class behind. And as the 2 BMW M4 drivers make their way past one of our TCR drivers, it is the case that Peter Bryan now trying to charge charge after Ryan Mars, who is only 2 seconds up the road, not too far away. And as they make the way in towards the Vidal chicane once again here, I think Peter Bryan now with some clear track in front of him, he will be focusing on the task at head, which is to try and get into that P6 position. And if he could do that, then he will then have an opportunity to try and close down 17 seconds to Thomas Mosek in P5, but little by little. In terms of the lap times, it is the case on that last lap, Peter Bryan at 8:25.49, he was almost 5 seconds faster than Ryan Mars. So on paper, we would argue that he should be able to do it, albeit that did seem to be one of those cases where I think Salvador is just having impeded laps, so we'll see how it plays out on the next couple of laps. But Peter Bryan definitely seems to be pushing on as he now makes his way upwards towards Flugplatz once again for what is his 12th tour of the circuit. But meanwhile, just an update in the battle for the GT3 Pro Class lead. The gap between Armstrong and Campbell now open to 3.7 seconds. It is gradually opening up in favour of Armstrong. And meanwhile, the update in the battle for the Touring Car Class lead between Cook and Anderson. Cook leading Anderson by 2.9 seconds. As they make the way on through. But Peter Bryan coming down towards Ehrenberg shortly. And as he's in that pursuit now of what is a mass up ahead, and you can see him every so often. Chris, obviously, we as racing drivers, when we see a driver in front of us who we're chasing after, they may be only 2 or 3 seconds up the road, but you can see them in the distance. Does that, in your opinion, sort of engender that extra 2/10 of the car? It gives you that extra motivation to push, much like Matt Terry here, where we try to make sure he can keep Bryan in his vision all the way through the lap?
It's a very difficult balance to sort of to find, because emotionally, yes, I think it is a huge motivation to have that driver in front of you. It just gives you something to focus on. But what you don't want to do, and this will become more of an issue, it's probably more of an issue for Terry right now because he's a bit closer. If you start focusing on the back of the car in front of you rather than your actual braking markers and all your various visual markers around the circuit, on a technical level, it will reduce your ability to drive that car to its maximum efficiency. So it is difficult, and this is especially one of the challenges with endurance racing, is keeping up that technical and physical discipline of trying to run your own race while still obviously keeping in mind the cars around you. But yeah, I think it's fair to say the bulk of our field have managed that superbly this race, because we've seen nearly no incidents when the cars have actually been fighting with each other. It's only been really those occasional and completely understandable off tracks that have led to the main incidents we've had, unless your name's Tim Darracott, in which case you're just getting spun around by people through no fault of your own. But you know, it's inevitable, it's going to happen at some point. But it's been, yeah, broadly, it's been a very clean race, and it'll be interesting to see just how much Matt Terry tries to mix it up with the Stage 1 and the RD cars just ahead of him, because he seems to be quite happy to just run his own race as it stands.
Well, indeed, and as we cut over to Alistair Catchpole here, the Effect eSports driver who's taken over from Darracott, rolling his way right now into the downhill run. And in terms of the relative pace, of course, Darracott was absolutely flying the GT4 class, but by comparison, and Catchpole not quite on the pace of Ben Kelly McCauley or 30 Jordan Johnson. In fact, that last lap losing 3 seconds almost to Jordan Johnson. I do think it was the case that Darracott was their #1 driver, and that's not to be nasty or to besmirch the reputation of Catchpole at all, but it seems so in terms of that relative pace, Catchpole not quite able to replicate what Darracott was delivering. But again, it's early stages in what we suspect is that final stint, so wait to see if Catchpole can build that pace up a little bit later. Perhaps he's just trying to get the car under his belt and get the feel of the car back into his hands as he makes his way now in the run down towards the last few quarters of the circuit, charging on down through Flats Garden Zwei as he roars on through, and as he does right now, it's a long way ahead. He's got a gap of what is just over 8 seconds to close up to Johnson. He'll do his best. And we've got to keep in mind, of course, our leader in the GT4 class of Ben Kelly McCauley for the Deutsche Payment Def Omens team is out of sync with regards to his pit stops, having made a much earlier first stop compared to everybody else. So we don't know whether there's a third stop of the cards, whether there's going to be significant fuel saving. We will have to wait and see. As meanwhile, in all of this, we are hearing as well that recently Landon J. Patmore has had to jump to the pit lane. That was the Sim Racing Grid M4 driver. It's gone very wrong as we get a replay here of what exactly has happened.
Yeah, it's a real shame for Landon, but like you were saying earlier, this was his first experience at the Nürburgring. We're lucky that it's only him that it's taken, and yeah, that's going to be a substantial amount of repair time needed for that car, which is a real shame, because I was hoping for Landon's sake he got to really experience everything that this track has to offer. And yeah, I think that's the, that's actually, I believe that's the 21 of Rich Cawthorne, who another car that's had quite an adventurous race. And I wonder if that's just another example, perhaps, of where some of these GT3 teams are attempting to do the entire race on one set of tyres. Maybe the challenges of this track are just proving a little bit too much in some instances. Again, I suspect because some of these cars will have pre-existing damage.
Indeed, and by trying to run the race, of course, on that single set of tyres, and if you've got a little bit of damage to the car, it means that every lap you go around, you're really having to assess the situation of the car. And the idea being that when you do pick up a little bit of a bump or scrape, the car evolves. Essentially, what downforce you have, it changes. We see here, it is the case. We'll come back to that point shortly. That Tyler Langenberg for D-Line Racing, having to hold off Jackson Lowry for FTR Esports GT4 Black as the Porsche driver gives pursuit after that P8 in the GT4 class. And it does look as though the Porsche driver looking very fast as they make their way down the dotted line, but now it's all about that grunt without the slipstream here. Can Lowry find his way ahead as they make their way uphill? And it definitely looks so he can, as well. Langenberg falls behind, but now in the draft, will he come on back in the run to the final braking zone? We'll wait to see as the camera pans round and as they come on down here. I don't think so this time. I think it's the case that Jackson Lowry has gained that P8 in the class, and he's done so admirably given the limitations of that Porsche. And Lowry really having to play to damage limitation for the remainder of this race as they come towards the end of this lap. We just stay with them a little bit longer here, as we can see it is the case that Langenberg has actually come back with the momentum as they come to the start-finish line with 47 minutes remaining, and now it's going to be the case. It'll be about the defense offered by Lowry as Lowry puts the car just slightly off-center, but he doesn't feel as though he's under pressure here as they break the way down to turn one, and Langenberg does not go for the move. Instead, he tucks in behind and waits for an opportunity later on in the lap as Lowry goes a bit deep but brings the car to defend the inside into the Mercedes arena. And going back to the point, sorry, go on.
No, it's after yourself, sorry.
What I was going to say is, but going back to that point earlier with the damage to the car, with the tyres wearing off, of course, as a driver, you have to get that feel for where the grip is of the car, where you can take speed into each corner and whatnot. And at the same time, when there's that damage, just unsettles the car. Those little things, can you carry as much speed into an apex? Do you have to turn in slightly early? Do you have to go on the brakes slightly early? Does the car unsettle more under braking? And those bumps and scratches are not just a foreshadow, not just an aesthetic thing. They do change the car's behaviour entirely.
Oh, for sure they do. And one thing I'm just keeping half an eye on as we get into the later stages of the race is where the Deutsche Payment team, when it was being driven by Daniel Muth earlier in the race. Now, they're in the lead as it stands, but we've been saying how they're out of sync with their pit stops. I think where the GT4s, they don't have to run even stints necessarily. I think looking at the number of laps they're going to do, one of their stints is going to be, it should be a bit shorter. They're only actually 2 laps out of sync. I wonder if they, like the other drivers, will only have to make one more stop. And obviously they will have to fuel longer, so that 20-second gap back to Jordan Johnson will come down. But I think Deutsche Payment might well still be within a decent shout of winning this race, because Ben Kelly-McCauley, like his teammate Daniel Muth, their raw pace is absurd. It's like some of the other drivers like Armstrong and Campbell at the top of GT3. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that gap is, for the last 5 minutes at least, it's maintained at around 20 seconds. I wouldn't presume that Deutsche Payment are completely out of this. We've seen before the amount of pace that their drivers can put into the car. It's not looking entirely healthy, I would say, and that's even after being repaired. But yeah, 20-second gap to Johnson, where possibly all the cars will still have to pit one more time, just with differing fuel levels. We could end up having a 3-way fight for the lead, depending on if Catchpole can catch back up to Johnson.
Indeed, I would agree with you there, and he's definitely demonstrating the pace right now as Kelly-McCauley carrying on from where his teammate left off, and they're the only GT4 team to have put in a sub 9-minute lap in this race, and they do hold the fastest lap of what is an 8:59.73. The next fastest lap by comparison is a 9-minute 0.63 as set by the Orbit Motorsport Venus team. In fact, my apologies, I've just checked the time screens again. I will correct myself there. No, we have got another 8:59 in the form of what was set by Darracott in the Effect Esports machine of an 8:59.82, but not quite on the pace of Deutsche Payment here. And I do reckon that you're right there, Ben, Chris. It is the case that, as I get all my names muddled up and whatnot, you have to excuse me for that, that the Irishman here is really pressing on.
Yeah, he is a very quick driver, so it'll be interesting to see. He's actually only by a second in the last few minutes. He has extended that lead, and it might just be he's at a particularly strong part of the circuit for himself. But he's got a reasonable amount of clear air. be interesting to see how he can use it. He'll have some GT3 cars coming up him, but so will Orbit, Effect, and Brabham behind them. So, in theory, they'll all be affected equally. But this is currently the huge-ass RD SimSport battle we've got here between Romano and Holman. This is currently the only battle on the field, or at least the only two cars that are within a second of each other on the same lap as each other. So we've gone from having a very closely fought battle earlier in the race to it has certainly settled into a bit of a holding pattern now. But I think we've got to that stage of the race where the drivers really, they just want to make sure they finish the race now. That's going to be, I think, at least their #1 priority.
Oh, indeed, I'd agree. And I think right now for the huge Aston team, it is the case with a very heavily damaged front end on that Aston Martin. It does look as though the car's really struggling to point a straight line, particularly through some of these medium to high speed corners. You can see actually going a bit deep into the braking zone there as Thomas Mosek comes on through. And well, the Czech Republic driver for JD Sim Racing 76 running P5 in the GT3 Pro class and GT3s overall. He's neither here nor there with regards to the fact that he is the best part 14 seconds clear of Mas in P6, but at the same time he's almost 20, in fact he's 22 seconds down to Aminan in P4. So I think that echoes your point there, Chris, with regards to the fact just focusing on getting the car to the end and picking up any more points should anybody drop it or make a mistake by the finish. As we cut to Sebastian Bosch-Williams, who earlier has managed to find his way past Peter Bren for what is the RD SimSport team, and is now coming up against a bit of GT4 traffic, but it should be too much, and is trying to push on in the hunt to Matt Terry.
Yeah, and he was a second a lap quicker on the last lap. Now, I appreciate they are on different strategies, and Seb is fresh in that car, having not had to. He had a nice hour and a bit break where Matt Terry, the only driver for his team, has now done probably about 4.5 hours of driving today around various configurations of Nürburgring. You're going to be a bit tired at this stage. So that 6-second gap, I think, is going to come down reasonably quickly. I'm also interested to see if Seb's got the pace to catch up to Stage 1 Racing, who are currently in 6th place. That would be a very good result for them. It is interesting actually looking at which teams have most benefited from their qualifying positions, and right now in the entire GT3 field that would be Roberto De Filippis, who is in 10th but qualified P19, and sort of beyond that behind them Roxy Gibson, who qualified 18 and is now 11th. But as we spoke to Jessica Martin earlier, we know that Roxy Gibson is on fresher tyres. So like with Seb trying to catch up to Matt Terry, it's going to be interesting to see in this GT3 field if the differing strategies that some of the teams have opted for, are we going to slowly but surely see drivers capture each other? And then with the driver being caught, are they going to sort of cave to that pressure? Because I think I certainly would 2.5 hours into an endurance race, and my second endurance race of the day, that mental fatigue I think is going to start becoming quite a big factor.
Oh, indeed. And just coming on, so I've just been looking at the timing screens, and we're looking here now at Christopher Cook from FTR Esports TCR. And the Canadian driver here, I think, will be feeling that pressure bearing down his neck, because right behind him, you can see them both in the camera shot. That is no joke. That is Mick Anderson from RD SimSport 3, who recently just put in his personal best of this race, and I think it's actually the fastest lap now of the TCR class, which was a 9:18.12, and that by comparison was almost 1.5 seconds faster than Cook. It is the case. This battle is swinging back in the favour of Mick Anderson. Of course, he's catching and he'll need to find a way to pass, but he is now on the charge here as Anderson, and as they make their way up into Stillstrecker this time around for what is their 12th tour of the circuit. It's the case the RD SimSport driver really relishing since that pit stop as they roll their way through the right hand corner here. Both drivers right on the limit, and I think Anderson, it's almost as if he's caught a second wind here since the pit stop, just chasing down Cook. The gap a while back was about 3-4 seconds. We commented on it, but now it has come down. It's been slashed by 75%, and they've still got plenty of time to go, and this can't be comfortable for Cook.
No, it's exactly what you were saying earlier as well, with the whole, having that driver in front of you. It's a nice target to have, and I think Mick Anderson right now seems to very much enjoying being the hunter rather than the hunted, because you get to the final stages of the endurance race, and I think in a lot of senses you'd want to be first. I mean, that's a slightly daft way of phrasing it, because I appreciate all drivers will always want to be first, but the stress and the pressure of having that driver behind you, I feel like right now Mick Anderson has probably got the advantage, and I believe James Holman for RD SimSport 258 has just been able to get past Giovanni Romano in the huge AS car. So we might be able to see a replay of how he did that, and you can actually, I wonder if the car in front, oh dear, that I believe was Matt Terry, him going off track. And again, I think I would like to say that the sort of follow-on from that is probably the mental fatigue we're talking about. Not a huge amount that Giovanni Romano did wrong there, because he was trying to keep out of the way, and he's ended up getting rear-ended by James Holman, who, again, I think that would have been a little bit unsighted. You can see Matt Terry really crabbing in that BMW to the point he's actually providing a draft. He was leading the GT3 AMs. We've now actually, I think, if Matt Terry, he will lose the lead of the GT3 AM field. We've now got a very interesting battle for the lead brewing between Sicania and Prismatic Minerva. They do, of course, have one fast repair, so we'll see if he's able to come out in a reasonable lead. Of course, if he's got 37 minutes to the end, so if he fuels to the end, this would be his last pit stop. So this is going to lead to some very interesting final few laps, because Gibson's going to have the fresh tyres over De Filipis for Sicania, and Matt Terry's already made their pit stop. So we really don't know in GT3 AM now. That's really sort of thrown it wide open. I do appreciate I may be overselling a 25-second gap, but like we've seen with plenty of other drivers, it's every time I've said someone's going to do something, or any of us have done it, it curses that driver. So I'm sure if Roberto's listened to this, all the stewards, as we said they'd had an easy day today, this is going to be Roberto De Filipis possibly inheriting the lead, although I don't think Matt Terry has opted to fill his fuel tank all the way to the top as he comes out after just 19 seconds. So will he have to stop again? And is that perhaps something that he wasn't able to think about doing? Because I'm pretty sure if he'd filled that fuel tank to the end, he could have made his final stop then and there. So I do wonder if that's perhaps a strategic mistake there from Terry. But of course, sometimes track position is more important. So I guess to sort of use a cliche, we'll find out in about 36 minutes.
But I would say there, Chris, just coming to your point, I think Matt Terry very keen to take that track position, because if he's out in front of his rivals there, then he doesn't have to worry about being caught up as James Armstrong there really swinging through. Is that damage on the front of James Armstrong's car, or am I just deceiving me after looking at our GT3 machines going around? It looks like it's been a bit of a bump.
I get what you mean, but I feel like with the gap still 3.3 seconds back to Sean Campbell, I suspect it's nothing that's cost him any time, because that gap has remained pretty consistent. And we've not really highlighted it, but look at what the gap back to P3 now is. These two have put nearly 2 whole minutes between themselves and the rest of the field in the last hour and 55 minutes. That really is incredible driving from the two of them. But it was with our sort of home advantage for Backmarker Racing Yellow, where Seb Boscher-Williams is driving for them. His next target is 24 seconds up the road, Thomas Mocek for JD Sim Racing. So Seb is good, but so is Thomas Mocek, so I'll be surprised if he's able to catch that. And also, it's nice to see JD Sim Racing driving the only Ferrari in the field. We want to see them do as well as possible to sort of champion the diversity of the cars. In fact, it's nice to say, really, that we've got 4 different cars in the top 5 of GT3. How often have we been able to say that in this series?
Well, 100% I agree with you that, and that goes to show you how it is the case that the balance of performance on the cars, as well as the tunes that our drivers bring to our teams bring to each and every circuit, means that we do have that diversification of the results and the manufacturers up there. And well, we never want it to become a one-make series, because at the end of the day, whilst we do have some plentiful racing action, it means we can't necessarily comment on the differences between the cars. We did speak about earlier, of course, but in round number 3, the BMW M4 being perhaps the most powerful all-round GT3, the one that has the best balance of those characteristics as a driver that you want. But then the likes of the Ferrari, the Lamborghini Huracan, and also the Porsche 911 all have their own unique characteristics, where they're a bit stronger than the BMW in certain aspects, but weaker in others. And speaking of a Lamborghini, Patrick Gannon here going on the offensive as he tries to find a way to get past the driver in front there, and I believe that is Rich Corfrell, and they're battling for P9 in the GT3 Pro class here, as the RPM Racing driver just not quite close enough to look for a move into the hairpin, but he'll be trying to use the better balance of the weight towards the rear of that Lamborghini to outfox the BMW, particularly through the corners later on. But we'll wait and see if that materialises as they roll their way into the braking zone. But I can just tell you, that with regards to the incident involving what was Matt Terry, also the Huge Ass Machine, and well, it was RD Sim Sport, it is the case the stewards have deemed it a racing incident, so no implications there. And I think that also may be why Matt Terry wanted to come out ahead after that pit stop, because if he was to pick up a time penalty, let's say, although we weren't expecting him to, then if he's ahead, then he can work to get rid of that time penalty by opening the gap, rather than being stuck behind Roberto De Filippis. Can you imagine how De Filippis would have driven it if he'd known there was the case that Matt Terry had a time penalty and was behind him? He'd probably make that Lamborghini so wide that it'd take up the entire circuit.
Yeah, I do wonder, it'd be interesting to know just how aware De Filippis is of the fact that he is now directly in contention for the race lead in GT3 Pro. As we can see, bit of traffic here on screen, and I think Gannon very sensibly just holding back a bit, now getting a little bit blocked in. Again, like we said before, all three classes are just as entitled to the road as each other, but this is Rich Corthroy's chance just to get away a bit, and I do think that Hyundai is struggling a little bit. I mean, it's a very difficult section to get round, so I believe that's Hayden Robinette for Driveline Simsport. Let's just see if we can get a look at the car number as well, but it certainly seems in my mind that that's the only car on the same part of the track. Yes, it is. And, you know, we saw earlier he was fighting with Stadler, but I think he has pitted a few laps earlier. We saw earlier with that alternate strategy, he's now 53 seconds behind Stadler. Of course, the overall pit time for the TCRs is around about 1:10, but that's factoring in the movement as well. So it's obviously not going to be a whole minute 10 seconds back. So I think we are looking at those two cars being at approximately the same place. And Sean Campbell has entered the pits. James Armstrong has not. So we are seeing a slightly different strategy from our two GT3 Pro leaders here. I do wonder if Sean is going to try the undercut here. As someone who loves a bit of pit strategy, I still don't quite actually understand the science behind how undercuts work, but goodness me, it's satisfying when they do.
Oh, indeed. And I think Sean Campbell's just got to throw everything at this now when he comes out of the pit lane, because there's no other way at it as they make the way through. But as they make the way on around, well, Armstrong, I think, will be having some traffic on this lap. And if it's his in lap as well, he wants this to be the fastest possible lap to respond to what is Campbell. But will that be impeding him?
Yeah, I do wonder. And Campbell himself may well have Landon Patmore to get round. See if he can. He's not a huge amount behind him on the track, and Patmore, as we were not hugely confident on the track compared to some of the drivers, which a relatively low confident driver is going to be less predictable. Lilac Zaya there. Oh, what was a very small incident suddenly becomes a big one just by the nature of where the barriers on the track are, and unfortunately for Zaya, that is a tow back to the pits, but it is also one less car for Armstrong to have to get round. Although, as Jess Martin was telling us earlier, they've got a strong relationship with Armstrong and their team, so I don't think we would have seen, again, like Lilac Zaya was doing a very good job of being good traffic earlier, so I suspect it wouldn't have been an issue. But after Campbell's pit stop, the gap is now 44 seconds. The pit lane time for Campbell was 45. He was stopped for 19 seconds. So these are all numbers to keep an eye on for when Armstrong pits, we presume, on the next lap. You have to feel like surely he's got to respond to that pit stop, as we see the leader from GT4s also pitting and Jordan Johnson inheriting that lead.
Indeed, and as they inherit the lead and Alistair Catchpole here comes on through, now the big question will be, how's it going to play out in the GT4 class strategy? Because we did have that big question of what was the Deutsche Payment Def Omens team being out of sync, as they're still being worked on here up on the jacks as well. As they finally coming off, they go racing once again, so now it's to the finish for them. And well, if we are expecting a free stop for all GT4 drivers involved, it was quite a lengthy stop for Kenny McCauley, and well, now we will see whether it works out as we look back. And as we see Mick Anderson here going very slowly, and Mick Anderson at the time was battling for the top spots in the TCR class, and it's a jump to the pits. Now, we haven't seen what exactly has happened to Mick Anderson, but meanwhile we actually get another replay here, and well, here seems to be the story as he's making his way through, and oh goodness, a car across the circuit, and well, that I don't think Anderson had any control other than to slam on the brakes and close his eyes. He's literally gone straight through.
That was,
And in fact, sorry, go on
yeah,
there,
that
Chris.
was our leaders in TCR. That was Christopher Cook who'd gone off track in front. That was the FTR Esports TCR that has just been, I think, ejected from society over the barriers there, it looked like. And that has put Harold Statler into the lead of TCRs, but also the alternate strategy we're seeing between Hayden Robinette and Statler, so that's Driveline SimSport pitting early. We now have it's absolutely blown the TCR lead wide open. And also, sort of quietly on top of that, Ethan Bass of Orbit Motorsport is now in the lead. Oh, and another netcode contact as the GT3. I believe that was Simon Ball of Track Limit Racing and the Porsche, and then got pushed over the cliff. Mick Anderson came round. Extremely unfortunate, and it just goes to show you, all it takes is a small incident, and it causes a huge issue. But here is your new TCR leader, Harold Statler, now up 2 places from qualifying in 3rd. And again, another driver who's just very quietly gone about their business, done a very good job. We'll have to see how he's doing compared to Hayden Robinette for Driveline SimSport. Is Stadler going to respond to that early pit stop on this lap, or are we going to see him go another? Of course, Robinette pitted on lap 11 and Stadler is now finishing lap 13. So there wasn't an immediate response, but having last stopped 6 laps ago, as we come to the end of this lap, Stadler is not going to be able to make it to the end of the race without another pit stop. He will at least need to do a splash and dash, but positive for him is it won't be a particularly long pit stop time. So we'll have to wait till the end of the race and see exactly how Harold responds to what happened with Robinette earlier.
Oh, indeed, and as he makes his way around right now, I would say, well, I think that might have just been the wrong call there to go past on to another lap. I would expect him to come in and cover off his position, given the fact that he's now inherited the lead. It would work out for Stadler, but he knows best behind the wheel, of course. We can only see and wait what happens here, but now, as he comes across that line, that last lap was a 9:20.09. We'll wait to see what Robinette's lap is when Hayden Robinette comes around next time for the Driveline SimSport team. As we see here, Robinette pushing his way down the Dossenhurst straight and under the Bilstein bridge he goes. But right now, I think Robinette will take some inspiration for this because he will know strategically he does technically have the advantage because he is ahead on the sequence. And if he can keep closing that gap down, it only brings things closer to him being the leader. And as he rolls his way for the final 2 corners here, we'll see him come to the timeline. And of course, that last lap there being in excess of 10 minutes is a reflection of the out lap. But now this is his first flying lap since the pit stop. And as he comes to line, what will it be? It's going to be versus a 9:20.09, and for Robinette it's a 9:21.37, so the gap is opening, it's not closing, and Robinette will want it to go the other way because right now it does look as though Harold Stadler is going to be holding on to that lead after the pit stops, but we will wait and see.
Yeah, it's the pressures of driving here. It's not just the maintaining your lead. You're going to know that your rival driver is on alternate strategy. They're not going to be appearing on a relative, and not all of these drivers will have spotters in their team. Some of these drivers have been going solo. I think that's why we'll have seen, for example, Matin back. That's why we'll have seen the incident earlier. Of course, he is still in the lead of GT3AM, but if you're doing this on your own, you don't have access to the strategic information that some of the other teams do. I mean, that's why, for example, I think it's so nice for Prismatic that they've got a team manager that can sort of go between all 3 teams, because in particular for those 2 GT3 teams, and they're not the only ones, of course, we do have other teams sharing drivers as well. Track Limit have got multiple cars, obviously FTR do as well. Doesn't always work out, as several of them have now retired, but being able to share that data, it can make a huge difference, and the more data you've got, the more informed a strategic decision you can make. But at the end of the day, racing really is just about who can drive the quickest, so to some extent the strategy doesn't actually matter if you don't have the pace to go along with it. But just sort of going to that GT3 amateur I say battle for the lead, it's not really there still. I mean, De Filippis is still 12 seconds behind. Armstrong has now pitted. Gibson actually 3 seconds quicker on the previous lap than De Filippis, but with that gap being 23 seconds, it would be very impressive if Gibson can catch up that much with the time remaining, but equally podium in what is a very stacked GT3 amateur division is still an incredibly good result. So let's not count our chickens before we've hatched, and let's see where Campbell can get to in relation to Armstrong with his pit stop and final pit stop of the race, barring any incidents.
Well, indeed, was we see Sean Campbell here making his way into the final two corners with Armstrong still in the pit lane right now. As we look out our commentary box window, it is the case. It will come down as Campbell comes to the line. Armstrong has just left his pit box, he's made his way out the pit lane, and he has in fact left the pit. So you can see that just in the distance, he's a speck in the distance, but that is the story being told of the strategy. As Armstrong now leads by an advantage of 4.6 seconds over Sean Campbell as they make their way onto their final couple laps, final 3 laps of this circuit to wrap up round number 4. And Sean Campbell now's got it all to do, and he needs to strike early here. He's not going to want James Armstrong to be able to get that car back up to its optimum running pace without closing that gap, because Armstrong will need this lap, his out lap, to get things running. Whilst he hasn't changed the tyres, they will have lost a little bit of temperature in the pit lane, and he has put the fuel in the car now, so Armstrong's got to settle in. And if he can settle in over the course of this lap and the gap does not come down, I think it is Armstrong's to lose as he makes his way down towards the turn 7 hairpin. But this gap still, to be fair, after 2 hours of racing, 4.4 seconds between the two leaders, given how closely they've been matched on pace, it's still a testament to how close they've been pushing one another.
Oh, it really is. But one potential spanner in the works is that there are 2 touring cars, the FTR and the track limits, being driven by Cook and Carr respectively. They still have to go. And Patrick Gannon here, I think, has just potentially... I think Gannon has perhaps employed the exploit to get back to his pit box. I don't know there, or just missed his pit stop when he needed to make it. It's pretty much taken him fully out of the running. But you know, it's good news for the other GT3s around them. And you know, as Jessica Martin was saying earlier with Brie Widner, may as well, even if the race is effectively over for the top positions, you may as well stay out because there will be attrition. You can still make it. And here you can see James Armstrong actually tagging the track limit car. Is he going to be able to get round him there? He's got round, and of course we can't assume that Sean Campbell will get round as well. Track limit not happy with him. It'll be interesting to see if that's going to result in anything, and the FTR of Chris Cook has let them through a bit more easily. I can see why James Armstrong would throw his car around, but again, you know, all 3 classes are equally entitled to their track position, and track limit are going to be battling Cook in the FTR for that 6th place in the touring car division. So I think they're well within their rights to at least query that with the stewards to see if there's anything they can do. And if Armstrong does get punished, it'll be interesting to see if that's going to affect the overall standings. Now, I mean, I'm going to put my steward's hat on. I'm not a steward, and I don't want me to be influencing the steward's decision. To me, that is at most a warning. I don't really see that being any worse than that. It's not my decision to make. That's just my opinion. But I'd be very surprised if we see a time penalty for what was just a small tap on the back of the car.
Well, indeed, I agree. It was a pressure tap. I don't think there'd be a need for a time penalty there. I think it'd be quite inappropriate, and I think that would actually upset the mood of the racing. But still, we look here to Matt Terry, our GT3 AM leader, who is continuing to open that gap up to De Filipis, now up to 19.2 seconds. Absolutely flying is Matt Terry as he makes his way towards what is the end of another lap, and as he rolls his way in. Is the case that right now, I think the question of De Filipis versus Gibson, well, the gap between the two of them, 20 seconds, it is gradually coming down in favour of Roxy Gibson in P3 in the class. But I think in the end, by taking the safe option, they've ruled themselves out of that P2 unless De Filipis gets it wrong. But at the same time, they played the safety call, which is guaranteed the P3. And I think, as you were saying earlier there, Chris, with regards to just making sure to be on the podium, and it's still an achievement. It is 100% a major achievement for the Prismatic Motorsports Minerva team, I should say, as I mince my words.
And Scania have actually come into the pits, so they've made a stop. I did actually just think, perhaps when Matt Terry did pit, obviously he took his fast repair, we're presuming, otherwise his mechanics worked at supersonic speed to repair that car. He may well not have needed to pit for a very long time, because he may well have only had half a tank of fuel in already. So that 20-second stop earlier from him, that could well have been. That could have been just a top up to get him to the end. We'll find out in the next 20 minutes, but it could well be that Matt Terry has very much got away with what looked like quite a severe incident earlier in the race.
Indeed, and as he makes his way down to the hairpin now, it is the case that F2's just got to bring this to its closure as De Filippis is leaving the pit lane, having only put a quick splash and dash of fuel in, and we expect the same for Roxy Gibson, but it will still be the case that Gibson on much fresher tyres, as De Filippis has not changed those tyres at all. And meanwhile, oh goodness me, what's happened to Simon Ball here? That car does not look happy, but it's going to limit to the pits, and here we get a replay. So it is, well, take it away, Chris.
Simon Ball was the catalyst in the earlier incident. I'm presuming he took his fast repair for that, but oh dear, yeah. That's one of the fastest sections of the track, and the front of that car not looking particularly happy with the way the curb just launched it into the railings, but it'll be a frustration for Simon Ball, who's made it over 2 hours into the race and had to use his fast repair after that very serious incident we saw earlier. It was a racing incident, I believe. But he's probably now going to have to sit there. He's about to get overtaken by Rich Cawthorne in FTR Esports for 12th position overall. His 4th position in the GT3 Amateurs is probably safe unless Landon Patmore can pull something seriously impressive out of the bag. 20 places and a lap and a half down. But, you know, you never know. That could be a severe amount of damage to repair on Ball's car for the Track Limit 911 team. We haven't hugely talked about Jordan Johnson's pace in this section of the race. If you've got the live timing open right now, he is currently, by some distance, the fastest of our GT4 class. He's 3 seconds a lap quicker than Catchpole in the Effect Esports car in second. He's 2 seconds a lap quicker than Walk Up in the Brabham Esports blue car. So Catchpole's going to have to pay attention for these last few minutes of the race to make sure that that second place on the podium is still his. It will be interesting as well to see. I think they'll all be fine, but the GT4's all pitted on lap 10. It will be close, but I think they'll all be fine to make it to the end on what they are now. But if they do have to splash and dash, Kelly McCauley is only 33 seconds off the lead and definitely won't need to pit again. Harald Statler has now taken his pit stop from the lead of the TCR. So let's see where Hayden Robinette will come in relation to him. In fact, Stadler has already finished his stop. I think he's pretty comfortably cleared the Driveline SimSport car. So Brabham Esports Hissing Sid, I would say, are very much in the driving seat for the win in the TCR. It's been a very competitive TCR field today. More often than not, I think where they tend to be smaller fields, they tend to spread apart, and we have these quite big gaps, but we've had some very close, very high quality racing from the TCRs throughout this race today.
Oh, indeed, I'd agree with you. And Harald Stadler for Brabham Esports, his Sid is really right now personifying, much like Hayden Robinette, to be fair. They're both personifying that adage that consistency is the key. And we talked about it so much in the build-up to this race. And these two, separated by 4.1 seconds, it has all come down to the relative pace between the two of them. They have not put a foot wrong, much like James Armstrong bar one minor moment with a little bit of a tap on the rear of one of the TCR cars. He has not put a foot wrong, and that's why he's leading at the moment with a 4-second advantage over Sean Campbell. And those are the real victors here today, the drivers who are absolutely able to fly, but at the same time avoid any of those challenges, avoid any of those minor mistakes. But we will have to wait and see with regards to that battle for the TCR lead, whether with Stadler coming out and having to get back up to speed, whether that will afford Robinette one lap of an opportunity to close up, or whether it will be the case that Stadler picks up where he left off. But also coming to your point earlier, Chris, with regards to our leader in the GT4 class of Jordan Johnson, I completely agree. The Orbit Motorsport Venus driver, if it is the case he's going to the end on this 2-stop, and it should be marginally close, but he should be able to do it, it is going to be a absolutely brilliant performance for them, given how the race started and how they've come up the order. And as we can see here, Sean Campbell currently in P2 in the GT3 class overall and the GT3 Pro class. It is the case the RSR by butt kicker FTR driver is not giving up.
Yeah, you do just have to wonder though if Tim Darracott had been victim to those two racing incident spins, the first on lap 1 and the last on his, I think it was the final lap of his stint. But you know, there was a good few, well, the first incident with having to come back through the field, and he did such a good job of it. The amount of time he'd have lost out on there, but then the second one as well, that's another few seconds. Catchpole's only 15 seconds off what the leader is. So you've got to think that as much as this I think will be Effect Esports' best results of the season, they'll be ruining the fact that the win was very firmly within their grasp. And I don't think with the lap 1 incident that Orbit did anything egregiously wrong. But there is an element of, I imagine Effect will be thinking, hang on, how come they got to spin us round and they get rewarded with a winning of the race? But equally, I think the stewards made the correct decision with just issuing them a warning, because it was lap 1, it was close, but it wasn't egregiously stupid driving, and sometimes these things happen. But let's not count our chickens before they've hatched. Effect aren't guaranteed second. Stephen Walkup in third for Brabham Blue is a very good driver, and it'll be interesting to see if these two end up a little bit closer and we have another battle just before the end of the race.
Oh, indeed, and as they roll their way right now through the latter stages of the lap, you can see both of the competitors for P2 in the single camera picture as we look to when it's Stephen Walkup here as the Brabham eSports Blue driver presses on with some of the GT3s coming through behind. It's going to be a bit nip and tuck, but he should be just about okay as they roll on through. I believe that is Matt Terry behind and Roy Mash just ahead now, as it's the case that Stephen Walkup separates the two GT3 drivers, and Matt Terry showing a lot of patience there. And I think the correct call to be patient in the run down as they make their way over the jumps. But right now, Stephen Walkup definitely bearing down on that P2 position. And I think Catchpot at this point will be grateful for the slight breather.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And I think as much as the Nürburgring is a very difficult track, I imagine the drivers have quite liked the fact they've not had to deal with tons and tons of traffic like they have at some of the smaller tracks. I mean, we kicked off the season at Brands Hatch. This is about as far as you can get from Brands Hatch in terms of track length. So very different profile of race, but it's one of the things I've really enjoyed about this season is we've had a really nice variety to the tracks we've been to, and you can't get more varied than the Nürburgring.
Oh, 100%. This circuit will literally test every aspect of the car, and then even more so as you see them all making their way down the Dottenhurst straight, and Stephen Walkup definitely here. I think just a little bit annoyed at the fact that he had to essentially yield to the GT3s, whereas it's the case that his main rivals having the GT3s charge on through on this back straight, but Walkup will take inspiration from that and push even more. And that last lap, to be fair, he was a whole second faster compared to Alistair Catchpole in the Effect Esports machine. And so Brabham Esports Blue have got the pace, and they do have 2 more laps. Well, I believe it'll be 2 more laps when he comes across the timeline this time to hunt down that second place position, as it's the case that we've got Jordan Johnson into the pit lane.
Yeah, that would be I think we maybe will be seeing the remaining teams from GT4. Yep, Catchpole's come in as well. Walkup's following him in too. I suspect Kelly McCauley for Deutsche Payment won't be coming in. I wonder how close he actually is, as RD Simsports Peter Bryan and Sebastian Boscher-Williams for Backmarker Racing Yellow are now together. I believe that's surely Boscher-Williams catching and overtaking Bryan, because Boscher-Williams has just done an 8:21.13 to Bryan's 25.34. That's very quick from Boscher-Williams. I can't believe it's possible to do nearly 3 hours of commentating, then spot another driver, and then go racing yourself. This is very impressive. Like, if you got me in a car now, I don't think I'd be performing to the best of my ability.
Well, it was a very nice pass there made into the opening sequence, of course. It's turns 1 and 2 by Boscher-Williams as he looks to hold off the RD Simsport BMW M4 behind. I think he is comfortable in that position right now. And if he can hold them off in the run onto the where's the Nordschleife loop, I think that will be the position cemented. But then again, let's not count out what is a very fast Peter Bryan behind as they make their way down towards Vido. And one of the closest battles on the circuit right now, as the backmarker Racing Yellow driver Boscher-Williams trying to hold on here, and as they make their way on through, we've had, I believe, no change with regards to relative positions between our drivers in the GT4 class after the pit stops. It is still Kenny McCauley leading for Deutsche Payment, Def Omens ahead of Jordan Johnson for Orbit and Motorsport Venus, and as the Catchpole for the Effect Esports team down in that P3 position, but the gap actually has opened up a little bit between them by looks of things. And also we do have Stephen Walkup a bit further back, as we do catch Alistair Catchpole here making his way through turn number 7 right now, and it looks like those gaps have opened up enough that it may be the case now. It's all about just seeing out these last couple of laps, and whether any driver makes mistakes. The gaps seem to be quite a bit too large for us to expect an overtake.
Yeah, I think they are, but looking back to when Daniel Muth had his accident about an hour ago, he couldn't have timed it much better, because it was pretty much perfect to just calmly get back to the pits, take the fast repair, do your splash and dash in the middle of the race, and they've sort of snuck back into the lead, because it was a pretty hefty hit that he took. So to be able to survive that and get back to the lead, that's very good strategic use of the pit stops there. That's very intelligent strategizing by the Deutsche Payment team. And I imagine for Orbit and Effect, they'll be very frustrated where it felt like they had a pretty safe, easy first and second lined up. And it's sort of cruelly been taken away from them by the sensible planning of other teams.
Oh, indeed. And they'll probably be analysing after this one how on earth did the car that was so heavily wounded jump to the head. But meanwhile, we see here in the TCR class, we've got a little bit of an inter-team battle between the two RD Simsport drivers. Daniel Martin from RD Simsport 2 being in P5, chasing after the sister team's driver RD Simsport 3 of Mick Anderson here as they make their way out of the carousel and now up the hill. And as they go chasing after one level, we saw these two running very close together in round number 3 on the GP loop. And now as they run the full circuit, they are back battling once again. And well, it is the case that sometimes when you're in these sister teams where you want to work together, but when it also comes down to those last couple of laps, that rivalry does start to build. You want to be the number one team or the number one team member. Just take us through that dynamic from your perspective, Chris. I mean, from my personal perspective, normally racing solo, not as part of a team per se, but I can imagine it's quite an odd feeling in terms of you want to beat your teammate, but you don't want to do anything to take one another out.
Yeah, it's almost, I would say, for the more calm, more placid drivers. For me, for example, it's a struggle because I'm so worried about potentially compromising someone else's race that you end up compromising your own, which is very much, oh dear, that's very nicely saved by the Audi on the outside there. And I imagine Roy Mars's heart was in his mouth there, because that could very easily have been the end of his race with Matt Terry right behind him. That's sort of not really sure where that's come from particularly. We're sort of assuming that Terry for the Matin back team, sort of his race was done for, but he's actually now very comfortably ahead of Sicania, looking very much odds-on favourite for the win for GT3 Am. And actually, yeah, like we were talking earlier, Roxy Gibson is still bringing that gap down. Was actually 9 seconds quicker on the last lap than De Filippis. Although that might well have been pit stop influenced. But yeah, the gap is down to 9 seconds with 7 minutes left, plus however long it will probably be. This is the last lap. It will really depend on basically when the race clock goes to 0. It's the next time the overall leader, which is currently James Armstrong, the next time he crosses the start-finish line. And unless he suddenly pulls out a lap about a minute quicker than his previous fastest, this is our white flag lap. Although normally where that's about a minute or two of driving, we've still got about 7 minutes here to go, which is one of the other reasons to love the Nürburgring, is we just get that extra bit of driving. And yeah, Terry has actually made that pass on Mars' stick. So it's been a very solid drive from Terry. Remember, he has driven that car for all 5 hours of racing today, and he's done it completely solo. And yeah, to still be able to have the wherewithal to still make overtakes, that is so impressive. And sort of going back to what we were saying about driving with teammates, it's again, all of these things you have to think about with endurance racing. I think the mental side of things is possibly understated or underappreciated by people not in endurance circles.
Oh, 100%. I can only imagine in terms of that mental endurance right now, Matt Terry must have the absolute mental fortitude in that car, because he has literally had to wrestle the BMW M4 around here, all different variants, over the course of almost 5 hours now. And well, it's absolutely showing the Matin Black driver here, sorry, the Matin Back, I should say, driver in the black livery car nonetheless. And he is pushing on his American driver as he makes his way now through the downhill run once again. And just looking at a gap between De Filippis and Gibson for P2, P3 in the GT3 AM class. It is the case. The gap now down to 8 seconds. It is continuing to come down. The sector times are swinging in the favour of Roxy Gibson, and we will have one more lap after the one they're currently on. So it'll be interesting to see how much it comes down by, and then whether any traffic that's outstanding will play into that battle right at the last hurdle as we continue to look on through. At our closest battles right now, it does seem as though we're waiting to see if any key battles do tee up beyond what is that battle between the RD Simsport drivers down in the TCR class. Although I say that, Daniel Martin, I believe, is into the pit lane, and it is the case he's released Mick Anderson to go on racing in P4. So it is now taking that quiet tone, and really I think a lot of our drivers now will be thinking, just one more lap, I've just got to get to the end.
Yeah, exactly, and there'll be a few drivers. So I think Harold Stadler for Brabham eSports Hissing Sid, who has just been overtaken by James Armstrong. they effectively, because he's reached them there, they'll get to do one less lap, which when you're leading a class by about 6 seconds, you want the race to be over as soon as possible. You do not want to do the extra lap, whereas Hayden Robinette will be cursing the way things have worked out. On the other side of things, I don't believe it will have an effect because they've all spread out, but GT4s, it doesn't look like the front four will be caught by James Armstrong before they get to the main start-finish line, so they will still have another lap and a quarter to go as we speak now. And Peter Bryan's managed to get back past Sebastian Boscher-Williams, so this battle far from over, although it does look like the backmarker racing yellow car really wants to get back past, and will do so as the RD SimSport has had to pit for a last time. That's one thing. We saw it at the end of the last race today. Lots of people misjudging their fuel strategies or just having to pit very late at the end, which just shakes the order up a little bit. Seb will be happy. It means he's got a nice relaxing final lap with about 20 seconds between him and any driver on any side. So nice easy way to bring it home. And I think we were a bit surprised at one point to see it, but it looks like a nice easy last lap for Deutsche Payment Death Omen. Unless, of course, they need to pit for a splash and dash now. But I guess we'll find out in about 30 seconds whether or not that's the case.
Well, indeed, I think he'll be just literally encouraging the car to just take little sips of the fuel at this point if the fuel is looking to be on edge. But I suspect that Kenny McCauley there and the slightly wounded Aston Martin will have planned this to perfection. Indeed, the Deutsche Payment Death Omen team seems to have really reworked the strategy since that early incident. And despite the car looking a little bit worse for wear, still just carrying on all the same as it makes its way down and around to the last two corners here, rolling into that braking zone as we see him finish this lap and then going on to that last one. Will there be a pit stop on the cards? No, he's going to the end here, so he's confident he's got the fuel and there's no need to worry. With an advantage of 8 seconds, and we can see here James Armstrong now halfway through the final lap of the race with the white flag out, as you're saying earlier, Chris, and well, with a gap at an advantage of 6 seconds at this point, it is the case. I think Armstrong for Brabham eSports, and we've just had confirmation as well there's going to be no further action with regards to the contact that he made with the Track Limit Racing TCR car earlier on in the race. It is just a coast to the finish, and one of the best feelings, but at the same time you don't want to switch off too much, because when you switch off of that final lap, that's where the nasty accident could happen right at the end.
Oh, 100%. And while we're just following this, let's just have a look at Sicania's most recent lap was an 8:33. That's De Filipis. Roxy Gibson just behind by 6 seconds, was 4 seconds a lap quicker. So I think Gibson will be cursing that there's not one more lap, because I think that position may well have been hers with one more to go. It's going to take a monumental effort to get that done on this last lap. Of course, we're assuming that the Sicania tyres will hold up. We're also assuming that neither of them pushed too hard. The gap has come, bear in mind, that gap was 30 seconds with 30 minutes to go, and it is now down to 5 seconds. That just shows you the advantage that the tyres can do, and we might well see an overtake here. James Holman for RD SimSport with James Hall of Vulcan Sim Racing just ahead. Just coming under the bridge here, and he's getting alongside. Who's going to be more confident on the brakes? I think he's already got ahead, so barring a major incident, that position is James Holman's. But of course, they're going to have to do that straight one more time, because James Armstrong is behind them. In fact, he's behind all 10 of the main sort of pack of GT4. Tom Jenkins in 11th for Track Racing GT4 will finish a lap down. There has been an incident, as you can see on screen there, involving Sean Campbell, who is dropping down the timing towers. Let's have a look and see what has happened to Sean here. Has he lost it all on his own, or is traffic involved? He has lost it all on his own. Has that car made contact? That is the difference between the elite drivers and the merely very good, because Sean has at 2 hours and 25 minutes into the race, he still has the wherewithal to get that car stopped on track. I mean, he had a 2-minute gap back to Evan Pickle in the Alpine Stars Geodesic car. Let's point out that all of the top 5 of the GT3 pros, I believe, have done this entire race solo, which is quite frankly insane. That is such good driving from all of them. And of course, and of course Matt Terry in 7th as well. It blows my mind. Remember, and of course, remember how strong Tuominen in particular's start was, making up all those positions and a good comeback from Pickle as well, because at one point Tuominen looked like he had that wrapped up, that third place. But yeah, it's been a very, very solid drive from everyone that's survived this far, pretty well the entire way through. Let's not forget our GT4 or TCR teams either. In fact, it's interesting to see with TCR that were it not for that incident between Anderson and Cook about half an hour ago, the entire TCR grid would have finished in the positions they qualified in for the top 5. But as it is, Stadler, Robinette and Bass have all made up 2 places, which is because of Anderson and Cook's incident. And yeah, it looks like, let's see, has something happened to Anderson here, or is this is James Armstrong coming across the line to take an incredibly well-deserved victory. Nice celebrating weave on the main straight. Very well earned. To be able to keep Sean Campbell behind you for that long and that comfortably, you have to have a very good drive indeed. Campbell has been imperious this series so far, to the point that he will feel disappointed with a second place at the Nürburgring. James Armstrong now doing his celebration donuts at the first turn. It is now safe for him to do so. Here is Harold Statler as well for Brabham eSports, hissing Sid in their first race under the Brabham banner, coming home for a very well-earned win. A solid drive, qualifying P3, finishing first. Stadler in the Hyundai Elantra, and that is a solid win for him, with Hayden Robinette just 9 seconds down the road for an equally solid second place for Driveline Sim Sports in the touring car class. And then Ethan Bass just behind in Orbit Motorsport Mars in their first race under their rebrand as Orbit, for our TCR podium coming through. And I believe our next driver we're expecting through for podiums is going to be Evan Pickle in the Alpine Stars Geodesic Racing team in the BMW, third place for GT3 Pro, but he is still coming along the back straight. Alistair Catchpole, it looks like, is very, very close, I think, unless our timing tower is playing tricks on us. He might well be in a battle with Stephen Walkup right now with half a lap still to go. But, you know, they've half a lap here. That's 4.5 minutes. So that's going to be a long old time for them to have to try and keep that going.
Oh, most definitely. As we see Evan Pickle here making his way for Alpine Stars Geodesic Racing down the Dottenhurst Straight, and really the best of the rest in the GT3s, with Armstrong and Campbell stealing the spotlight and just being in a world of their own. But Pickle really being the best of the rest as he comes roaring on down, and it's not to take away from Antti Tuominen's brilliant drive, particularly at the start, but Evan Pickle in the end being able to recover and make his way up to that third place. And as he rolls his way through the final 2 corners here, it's going to be a well-earned final step of the podium in the GT3 Pro Class of Pickle as he crosses the line in the number 46 machine. Lights flashing there. They know they've achieved something special here today. And then we see Mick Anderson for RD Sim Sport 3 coming to the end of his race in the TCR class. That'll be a P4 in the TCR class. He'll be very pleased with that, given how it's all played out from start to finish as he crosses the line there. And there we see Antti Tuominen coming across for 49 Motorsports Maroon. Their P4 stay not quite on the podium, but still the Finn will be happy with that, given the number of places he gained at the start. And then we do have Christopher Cook coming to the line in short order to complete the top 5 in the TCRs for FTR Esports and TCR here as a Canadian at Fulton. And it is the case, did not gain any places in class per se today, but did gain a good number of places overall coming to that line. But then we do have Thomas Mosek, meanwhile, in the P5 position in the GT3 Pro Class, and he'll complete that top 5. And the Ferrari driver, the variety driver here in the Ferrari, crossing the line in another solid top 5 finish, and that'll be one that he'll be pleased with, gaining 3 places since the start. And I do believe we are still waiting on some of the GT4s, but we do see our commentator for round 3, Sebastian Posher Williams, coming to the line for backmarker Racing Yellow in the end, hold on to that P6 despite the change from RD Sim Sport, and crossing the line there in a comfortable P6 finish, flashing the lights, and with a weave as well, happy with that finish. And then we can see Matt Terry here. It's been a while, but here is our leader in the GT3 AM class. And while the Matt in Black and the Matt in Back driver has had a race where he has been in a class of his own, and as he comes to the timing line here, he is your winner in the GT3 AM class. A brilliant drive from the American. He comes to the line, he straight lines it across here, and 9, the job is done, and upwards and onwards in his championship campaign, taking the win by almost 1.5 minutes. Roy Mass in the end coming home P7 in the GT3 Pro class ahead of Peter Bryan, P8 in the class, as he comes to the timing line. And as he comes on across here, we still do have a few more drivers to come to the finish line. And we do have Lilac Zia here for the Prismatic Motorsports Academy team. Was the case, it went a little bit wrong at one point, but they still got the car back out onto circuit. And right now, just cruising it down the Dottenham straight. And you'll be glad to see the checkered flag on this one. It has been a test of endurance, and it is a test that has been passed as Lilac makes her way down towards the final 2 corners. Right on through here. It feels like forever going down the straight. I can tell you, especially the TCR machine where they haven't got the highest top end speeds, but heading on through, not too long to go now. Just literally at 2 more corners with that braking zone, and then all said and done as they're coming into that braking zone. And as they do, we still do have a few more drivers to come through. And the Prismatic Motorsports Academy driver coming to the line there to complete their race. A fantastic drive, crossing the line, taking their checkered flag. And now we do wait on our GT4 drivers to come to the end. We've still got some GT3s still to come, and it will be at Roberto De Filippis, who has been able to hold off in the end the change from Gibson. In fact, Gibson has actually fallen back quite a bit by the looks of things, but the Italian will come home P2 in the GT3 AM class. And then here is Ben Kelly McCauley, who will take the win in the GT4 class for Deutsche Payment Depot. And it all looked to have gone wrong at the start of the race, but it's all come back in their favour, and the Irishmen will be pleased with that. And that weave from side to side, the flash of lights, they are absolutely over the moon, winning the end by 8 seconds ahead of what is Jordan Johnson from Orbit Motorsport Venus, crossing the line there. And the American, I think, will be wondering how on earth did they not take the win, as there will be Alistair Catchpole from FX Esports, a team that lost out at the start. They recovered to P3 in the end. I think they will feel very mixed emotions about this race, but held on to P3 come the finish, just ahead of P4 Bram Esports Blue, with Stephen Walkup at the wheel coming across the line there. Unfortunate to miss out on the podium. And then here is Roxy Gibson bringing home 3rd place in the GT3 AM class. I think having an instant on that final lap, hence the delay in that pursuit of De Filippis, but still a well-earned P3 and the bottom step of the podium. And well, what a race as we confirm all of our podium finishers, but we've still got more to come, Chris.
There's still a few cars out on the track that we're gonna see. I think Catchpole did a very good job there of holding off Walkup on that final straight, because Walkup was so close for basically the entirety of that last lap. So for Catchpole to be able to defend that across the across the back straight and then the start finish line, well done there. I think Rich Cawthorne for FTR Esports GT3, I think, can be quite happy with 12th, considering how adventurous, shall we say, that race has been. With James Holman, I think another one who's had quite quietly a very solid race, hopefully finishing P5 if nothing goes wrong in this last stretch of the race. But yeah, I think for Roxy Gibson, there was no harm in just pushing as hard as possible, because there was such a big gap back to Cawthorne for FTR Esports that even we saw how badly that car was crabbing across the start finish line. I mean, it's actually pretty impressive that Gibson's got that finished when I presume the incident happened with about 3 minutes of the lap left to go. That's quite a long time to drive a car that badly damaged for. But again, it's the last lap. There's no harm in pushing, see what happens. And it's still a creditable, P3 with James Holman finishing P5, James Hall finishing P6, and then Elson and Lowry coming home not too far apart from each other. Elson in particular for Backmarker Orange having a pretty quiet race. The 2 Porsches 7th and 8th together, pretty credible for them. And Sven Demel for Huge Ass with Tyler Langenberg just behind. I believe these are the last 2 cars left racing on the track. Are we going to see a last-minute lunge? I think Langenberg is just a little bit too far behind for D-Line Racing, who, again, another team that have had a pretty quiet race, but got the car home pretty safely. And P10 in this GT4 field and P9 for Huge Ass is, to be honest, still very, very good. It's such a strong field this year that the fact we had as many as I think 35 cars managed to finish that race, with 2 others just a lap down, of a field of 44 on this track. That is pretty incredible indeed.
Oh, most definitely. And now as we get the race results subject to Stuart's confirmation, it is the case that in the GT3 Pro class, Brabham Esports taking the win in the end by 19.1 seconds ahead of our side by butt kicker FTR. Alpine Stars GD6 Racing completing the podium there, ahead of 49 Motorsports Maroon, and JD Sim Racing 76 completing at that top 5 in a very close set of racing for the top 5 finishers. And also we can see Backmarker Racing yellow there, P6 in a valiant effort. And well, in fact, if we go through the full GT3 class, my apologies, Matt in Black there coming home P7, and they take the GT3 AM win as well, ahead of Stage 1 Racing Senior GT, RD Simsport and Sakani Endurance Motorsport completing that top 10 in the GT3 race results. And I think we may have the GT4 results coming up shortly. Oh, sorry, my clarities. We've got the AMs coming through first, and there we have that confirmation of Matt in Black taking the win in the GT3 AM class ahead of Sakani Endurance Motorsport by 1.5 minutes when all is said and done. And then it's a case that Prismatic Motorsports Minerva taking that third place on the bottom step of the podium, but a great result ahead of Sim Racing Grid M4, Track Limit Racing GT3 and 911, and Stage 1 Racing Green completing the GT3 AM race results. And that's for GT4s. Over to you, Chris.
The winners, that was Deutsche Payment Death Omen, and they managed to do 18 laps in the end. Nearly 8 seconds behind Orbit Motorsport Venus in their first race since their rebrand, have come through in second. Effect Esports, 25 seconds down the line, managed to hold off Brabham Esports Blue, but they will be wondering what could have been. But yeah, we had 4 drivers finishing within 26 seconds of the lead, which is very good going. RD Simsport 258 have finished 5th, just a minute and 3/4 down, and then 4 seconds behind them in 6th was Vulcan Sim Racing. Then we have our 2 Porsche cars, Backmarker Racing Orange and FTR Esports Black, just 2 minutes off the lead. Hugh Jass, after a very eventful race, coming in P9, with D-Line Racing just behind them in P10. Track Limit Racing GT4 finished a lap down with 49 Motorsports Magenta, 2 laps down. And then we had 2 DNFs for FTR Esports GT4 Yellow and RTL Racing Team Lindbergh. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have our TCR race results. Brabham Esports Hissing Sid making it 2 wins in their first race as the Brabham team for the 3 classes available. 8 seconds clear of Driveline Simsport. A very good result for Harold Stadler in the win, and a good race for Hayden Robinette in second. Orbit Motorsport Mars, third place, 12 seconds down, driven by Ethan Bass today. RD Simsport 3 managing to get a minute and 3/4 behind in 4th, followed them by FTR Esports TCR, Track Limit Racing TCR, Prismatic Motorsports Academy, Sim Party Racing in 8th, and then 1 lap down after that incident, RD Simsport 2, but no early retirements in the Everclean TCR series. First of all, let's have a chat to our overall race winner and GT3 Pro race winner, James Armstrong. James, congratulations on the win. Was that easy, or were you stressed out in that booth?
It was a mix of both, to be honest, that race. At the start, when I was battling with Sean, we were just simple draft past each other on the back strip, but then coming into Tiergarten, I really thought we were going to have a Van Tor's brother style crash, but luckily we both left each other space. But as soon as Sean dropped back to like 3 seconds back, I knew that it was pretty much impossible for him to catch, because we were almost identical on pace. So yeah, at that point it was fine.
It absolutely blew our minds in the commentary booth just how much quicker you guys were than everyone else. Does that factor into how hard you can race each other, knowing that you're not necessarily at risk of letting someone else into your battle?
It does a bit, yeah, but I've raced against Sean for like 2 years now, so we really trust each other when we're battling. But it does help when you don't really have any cars behind that can catch up and interfere with your battle.
Yeah, I think that seemed to be the case for us. Did you find being in the BMW, did that feel like it was an advantage? It certainly seemed like on the back straight that it was a lot harder for Sean to pass you than it was for you to pass him.
Oh yeah, I think the BMW was quite a bit better than the Porsche around here. I was quite surprised, to be honest, that Sean was keeping up with me. I was looking in my mirror every corner and I was seeing 2 wheels in the grass pushing really hard. But yeah, the Beamer is pretty strong. The setup was not that good though. I had quite a lot of oversteer in the high speed and lots of understeer in the low speed, so it didn't really help, to be honest. But yeah, I had a lot more speed on that back straight compared to Sean though. That was really helpful.
Was it then quite stressful where he possibly had a bit more speed, or at least more stability through the corners? Was it stressful when he was behind you? Was he didn't seem to particularly be looking to make the move, but was that sort of a thought in the back of your mind that you had to keep an eye on what he was doing when he was behind you around the rest of the circuit?
No, not really. The only place I had to worry about him, like in my mirrors, was on the GP circuit, because he was never close enough coming onto up the hill, coming up to Muck curve. to make a move there, and you can't really make a move anywhere else on the Nordschleife, so I wasn't really that worried as soon as I got onto the Nordschleife. Just had to make sure I was ahead of him every lap coming onto the Nordschleife.
Well, congratulations for your race win tonight. You've very much earned a rest after today's driving, and we'll see you next time out. Congratulations again, James Armstrong, for Brabham eSports.
Yep, thank you.
Right, so next, let's have a chat to Ben and Dan of Deutsche Payment Omen, the two drivers today who have won for the GT4 series. Ben and Dan, congratulations. You must have, with that mid-race crash, been a little bit worried that the race still wasn't there, but it worked out at a reasonably good time for you both, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, it was really embarrassing to fall away from the lead. I thought that's it, game over, but yeah, kept pushing on, and yeah, somehow still got the win.
Were you particularly worried about the pace from some of the other cars? I think Orbit and Effect at certain points were driving very quickly, so I wouldn't say it was a done deal, even with the sort of pace you two typically show us.
Oh, sorry. I was I was definitely pretty stressed. I think, especially, we put ourselves in the back foot, so we were just pushing as hard as we could. I don't think we even really knew we were in the race until the last couple of laps. Daniel did the numbers, and we realised that we should have a small advantage after the pits. But yeah, that was a super stressful race. I'm pretty tired now.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was basically, did you realise that you'd basically done your splash and dash in the middle of the race, and actually you were pretty okay with the fast repair, meaning that the damage wasn't the end of the world? How was the car to drive after the crash back to the pits? Was it manageable, or was that very, very dicey?
Yeah, I got pretty lucky that I pretty much went straight on into the wall in the barrier, and luckily didn't get any suspension damage, so it's just like a crumpled front, and yeah, just top speed was gone. But other than that, really got lucky that no engine damage or no suspension damage.
And I think one more from me is, did you find, was the GT3s, were they behaving reasonably well when they went past, and was it quite nice to not have to worry about the traffic quite as much today?
Oh yeah, it was definitely a relief. The GT3s were sound. I nearly died actually, because I got the typical panic with the GT3 guy coming up behind me, but managed to kind of pull a save out of the bag, thank God. But GT3s were great. Traffic was grand, really. I was pretty impressed.
Well, thank you for having a chat with us both. Congratulations again on your win, and we'll hopefully see you both next time out.
And thank you, lads. Cheers. Talk to you again.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Paul, I believe we can now talk to Harold Stadler from the TCRs, if you'd like to roll with this one.
Indeed, and welcome to the commentary box, Harold. And what a race for yourself and the Brabham eSports hitting Sid T. It looked as though it was tough out there, but at the end of the day, you brought home the win in the TCR class. How does it feel to stand atop of the podium?
Yeah, hello everyone. That was a bit of a lucky one, but sometimes racing takes, sometimes racing gives, and today it was on the giving side for us. So I'm very happy to win my first race under the Brabham flag, and that's a pretty good start. Thanks for getting us on board with the Brabham team, and hopefully it will go on like that.
Well, indeed, and just going through your race, it looked as though for quite some time it was more of a battle to be on the podium, battling for P2, P3, but then we saw the leaders involved in incidents, well, particularly in P3 at the time, and then the two leaders were involved in a major incident which saw them both have to jump to the pit. Was it a case that as soon as you heard it, you thought, right, we're on for the win, or was it a case of you just suddenly discovered you were leading the race as you came onto the next lap?
I got told by my spotter, Foxy, that they got trouble with GT3s, and I saw the P2 guy trying to limp back. So yeah, I was already aware that we were in the lead from then on. Then it was just a matter of will the GT3s catch us again or not? And we just went to the safe side with the fuel and took a bit for one lap more fuel. yeah, and it turned out pretty well.
Well, indeed. And one thought with regards to the battle we saw between yourself and also the Driveline SimSport machine as piloted by Hayden Robinette, there was quite a back and forth on the strategy between you two, but it seemed to say you were always one step ahead in that strategy battle.
Yeah, I actually had a bit trouble in the first laps on full fuel, so I couldn't stay with the leaders after the start. That brought us into the battle with Hayden, and yeah, after a few laps, when the car went good, I tried to gain that spot back and open that gap, which is pretty hard actually with that draft and the TCRs. I managed to get lucky again with getting GT4 at the right time. That split us. So, and from then on, it was more or less like trying to get to keep the gap, staying ahead, maintaining the gap without him getting back to the draft. And at the end of the race, with the last pit stop, we weren't sure if it works out, if we can stay ahead or not. So we were aware that there might be a battle again with Hayden. Yeah, but it turned out that I think it was 4 seconds or something like that ahead after the pit stop. So yeah.
Well, definitely it worked out in the end, and you're able to bring home that fantastic result. And well, looking ahead, of course, to Laguna Seca in what is a few weeks' time. How are you feeling for the American circuit?
Yeah, Laguna Seca will be a tough one, I guess. I mean, it's a tight track, narrow track, and a bit up and down and blind stuff. So will be pretty interesting with GT3 traffic and such. So yeah, let's see what happens there.
Well, we look forward to seeing what happens there. But until then, thank you for joining us in the interview room, and congratulations once again on a well-deserved win.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for Brabham having us on board, and see you next time.
All the best. But having spoken to Harold, I think, Chris, it's now time for us to have a chat to to Evan Peakle there from the GT3 class.
Yes, Evan, for Alpine Stars Geodesic, we've got time for one question with you. Congratulations on your podium. Did you enjoy your battle with Antti Tuominen of 49 Motorsports? It seemed to go on for nearly the entire race.
Oh yeah, that was a good battle. It was more or less helping me stay on track, because before this race I haven't done more than 2 laps like in a row, so that was kind of hard for me. And lap 1 I hit the wall and had bent steering, so
Oh wow! Well done indeed. With how well Antti Tuominen's start was, I think that puts even better sort of kudos on your third place in your podium. So congratulations, Evan, and apologies we don't have more time with you, but we look forward to seeing you next race out. And well done again.
all right, thank you.
So next we're going to have a word with Hayden Robinette of Driveline SimSport. Congratulations, Hayden, on your second place. You must when you looked like you were fighting for just the third step on the podium, it must have ended up quite a nice surprise that you were fighting for the win and eventually got a second. So how did you feel your race went?
Overall, I think we did a pretty good job today. I honestly didn't have much for anyone on the GP circuit, but Nordschleife is one of my favorite tracks, so I was honestly pretty excited to give it to round 2 today. And Jason made the call mid-race that I should probably solo it out because he had a little bit less pace than I, but he was the one holding it down the GP. So the Nords is always a game of attrition, so like Harold said, it's racing gives and racing takes, and today was pretty giving, so we're pretty excited about our result.
Well, congratulations again. Sadly, we've only got time for one question at this point, because it's to be honest, it's lovely that all the drivers want to have a chat, and we really appreciate it. But congratulations again on your second place, and we look forward to seeing you next time out.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
I believe next we're going to talk to Jordan Johnson. Paul, I think I'll let you take this one. It's Jordan of the Orbit Motorsport team.
We welcome you, Jordan, to the commentators booth. And whilst we only have time for one question, got to ask, that battle for P2 with what was Alistair Catchpole from Effect eSports and chasing after Deutsche Payment, bit of mixed feelings today, given it looked so you're on course for the win at one point.
Yeah, I was looking on course for the win, especially after Deutsche Payment's mistake. The pace was good, especially for the limited prep and setup that we had, but especially want to just go on record and apologize to those 299 Effect eSport guys. And I know our first incident was a bit of a mixed bag, and then the second was very much netcode. So it would have been a very, very fun race to the end. I think a win could have possibly been in it had we minimized our mistakes, but definitely a fun race, and hopefully in the next one we can keep it a little bit cleaner on my end.
Well, we do look forward to seeing how you guys get on in the team next time out. But thank you for joining us in the interview room, and all the best for your next race.
Thank you.
And finally, we can have a word with Tim Darracott of Effect Esports. Tim, that, like we were just saying with Jordan Johnson of Orbit, that must be very mixed emotions because you had a phenomenal drive, but you must also be feeling what could have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a pace for a much better result than third, but that's racing after all.
It seemed like racing incidents for the two of them, but it must be promising for the rest of the season. Apologies, we've got time for this one last question, but how are you feeling for next race? Is it yourself and Alistair again, or is Paul joining you for any more races?
I think it'll be me and Paul for the next one. Looking forward to it.
Congratulations again on the podium today, and commiserations for what could have been an excellent fight for the win, and we look forward to seeing you next time out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers. So we have got a few more races left. We've just mentioned the Laguna race. That is our next one out. That is on July the excuse me, my brain's gone. July the 2nd. It's very late at night. And that's the 4 hours, and then we've got 2 rounds after that. We've got the 30th of July, we have got the 6 hours round Imola, and then our final race of the season is going to be the 20th of August, and that is the 4 hours of Watkins Glen. All of these races will be kicking off at 4 o'clock GMT live on the Total Sim Sport YouTube channel. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all this evening. Massive thanks for race 1 to Sebastian Bosch. Massive thanks as well to my co-commentator Paul Walsh, who's been here all day. And of course, let's not forget Sean Cranley-Swash in the production booth, who has also been here all day and made all of these lovely graphics you've seen. And although they've not had a huge amount to do today, also thank you to the stewards, James Rivett, for sorting out all of the naughty drivers today. And of course, his team. We will be back with you for Laguna Seca. I've been Chris Rowlands. We should hopefully have Tim Cox back for you as well. So if you've missed his dulcet tones, he should be back. And we shall see you next time.